Bam. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Break the Rules live stream. I am your host, Lev Polyakov, and we are here to have a friendly debate about young Earth creationism. And we have got with us today a wonderful panel. You all know and love Neal, Gnostic Informant, great guest of BTR. Recently, we had a wonderful stream with Jason Reeser-Johnny, which I look forward to sharing with all of you guys. Sorry, not stream recording. This is like a professional 3 camera setup. You guys have never seen anything like it before. It's going to blow your minds. And we also have with us David of Catholics, like it's called CVS, but it's Catholic versus podcast, which I had the great pleasure of being on. And we found out about each other through Styx Hexenhammer 666, whose house you came over to.
Yeah.
And that was a very interesting way of getting introduced. And I think that it's very fateful that we should be talking about this right now. We are talking about something that, it's a very strange but interesting subject to me, like how life came about, what exactly we are. And I just want to dive right into it. But first, ask David here, how did you come to be in your Christian background today and have the kind of views that you have? And then we're going to kick it on over to Neal. Everybody be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. So, David, go ahead, man.
Thank you very much for having me, Lev. It's a pleasure. It was a pleasure meeting you, having you on my show, and really happy to be here. And yeah, I'll just give the really quick version of my journey. I was born and raised Protestant, and I was very happy with that Christian upbringing up until the age of 14 when I had a dream about Jesus. It was a beautiful, friendly dream when Jesus waved to me. But when I woke up, I knew it was counterintuitive, but I knew that I was no longer a Christian. I was no longer a monotheist. I was an atheist. And it was very counterintuitive. I knew it was. But for the next 25 years, I was an atheist. I was doing, dabbling with all kinds of worldviews and, was a nice guy agnostic for a long time. I was a hardcore atheist at certain points. And I became, went down different rabbit holes. I became an atheistic Satanist just before my conversion in 2009 to God and religion.
Wow.
And I was also, which is even more shocking, much more shocking, I became a hard solipsist, which means that I thought I was the only being, a disembodied mind, that I was God, the God of Buddhism, that kind of God. But that didn't last too long because that was a very, 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 very dark experience. So I came to God, and then I reluctantly chose Christianity just because I didn't feel worthy of being a Jew. Calling myself a Jew seemed fake. And I didn't believe in Muhammad or the Quran. But I hated Christianity, but I sort of just caved in and said, okay, I'll be Christian. And I just by happenstance, I met a Catholic monk, and he invited me into his monastery because I approached him and asked him, can you teach me about this God that I've just discovered, the God of monotheism? So long story short, 2009, I became Roman Catholic, and I'm very, 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 very happy to be Catholic. I never believed, even as an atheist, I never believed that I was an ape or a fish or anything else. I never believed the nonsense story of evolution. No offense to those of you who do believe it. I never believed it, even as an atheist. So it's not that shocking that when I found out about special creation, that I accepted it. So that's my story.
Just to be clear, when you're talking about creation, what is the amount of time that you would give from creation to now?
Well, I think it's 6,000 or 7,000 years, 7,250 years or something like that. I don't know the number. It's like roughly
John Skilletses,
under 10,000, like under 12,000 years, something like that.
Yeah, John Skilletses, the church historian from the Byzantines, has 4004 BC as the day of Adam's. Yeah,
it's something like that. It's something like that. I'm not that married to any particular date, but it's like I don't want to go much past 10, 12,000.
To me, 10,000 and 6,000 makes no difference compared to billions of years.
Exactly,
so it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. By the way, David, can you get a little bit closer to your mic just so your guys' audio is a little bit quieter relative to Neal? Yeah, but it's all good. Yeah, just closer to the mic. So I would start with Neal now. Neal, now that you have heard what David said as far as the timeline goes, what would be your thoughts? Let me know what you think.
Well, we didn't get to
Um,
introduce Neal and his worldview. What's going on?
Well,
oh
I
yeah,
mean, we know like Gnostic Informant on BTR, he's a regular here, but for those who
sure.
don't know him,
I'll give
he's
a quick rundown
yeah, yeah,
just to match it up.
yeah.
I actually was the opposite. Grew up Catholic, got baptized, confirmed, all that stuff. Did the whole nine, went through the whole process, and then skedaddled out. Never went back. And had a lot of ups and downs in my life. Went through prison system for a little bit. Had
Ooh.
a period of about 10 years in the 2010s. Rough. That whole
Wow.
decade gone,
But you
wasted.
look good. You look so pretty. I don't
Yeah,
know
I
how
made
you
it
did
out.
that.
I made it out alive and fresh, and I'm good. And my brain's still somewhat active. I'm okay. I'm not like completely brain dead. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah. So then I started, but I actually part of being like locked in and the only thing you can do is read. And I never was a reader until I started going in and out of prisons and rehabs and stuff. Um, Actually, you mentioned Styx. There's a couple of books that I have, and I didn't know this was Styx, but it's the same. He's what's his
Carl Warwick.
Carl War? Yeah, I got some of his stuff on alchemy and hermeticism,
Oh.
and those are some of the first books I was reading. Jordan Peterson, Carl Jung. So I went deep into that's where the Gnostic name comes from.
Ah,
Yeah, I got some of 'em here in the back as well in the old
Yeah,
library. But yeah, it's great that
cool.
Styx was able to unite both of you guys together. But as
yeah, in
far
a
as
weird way. Yeah.
yeah, but as far as the
Styx
kind of
was
things,
actually my cellmate when I was doing time in the federal prison. Kidding.
No
Kidding.
shit.
Kidding.
wow.
Oh, I was not gonna
Kidding.
say I didn't want to
Kidding.
doubt you.
Kidding.
Wow.
Mm. Wait, what did you get into prison for?
I
What
was
was your
not in
thing?
prison. I was never in prison.
Yeah.
Ah, damn it.
It's
Okay.
my
Well,
That would
it's
have
my
been such a cool backstory, though. That would have been
stolen
so cool.
valor.
Yeah,
Stolen
that
valor.
would have been so cool.
Yeah.
Anyways,
So anyway, when it comes to this question of young Earth creationism, I know Neal, you are very knowledgeable when it comes to how it came about. Like, why is it that people believe
okay.
in that particular date? So maybe that's a good place to start with.
Yeah.
Let me know what you think.
So it's very simple. This is what the church fathers were doing. They went to the genealogy of Luke, and the genealogy of Luke has a genealogy from God to Adam to Seth, all the way to Noah, all the way down to Abraham, all the way down to David, all the way down to Zerubbabel, all the way down to Jesus. So this is simple math. Either the Bible's correct or it's not. And when they're going to say the Bible's correct, that's their guiding morality that they're presupposing. Fine. So we take all the dates, we take all the ages of these people and when they had their children, which is all in the Bible. All of it is. And then some of them are like not exact, but you can do a range of it's somewhere between. So long story short, you do the math. From Jesus to Abraham is such and such many years. From Jesus to Noah is like 2700 BCE. And then you keep going back to Adam. You end up at 4000, or roughly around 4004 BC. That's what John Skilletsy's ended up on. There are other estimates that are a little bit different. It's somewhere around 6,000 years old, 6 to 10,000. I'll even, for the sake of this argument, I mean, to keep it like fair, I guess we can say somewhere between 6 and we'll even jump it up to 10,000. It doesn't even matter at this point. What I'm saying is, it's different than what scientists and what archaeologists are saying about rock formations and layers. I'm going to jump ahead. You just wanted to know about how we got to that 6,000
Yes.
date, right?
Yes.
So,
Exactly.
yeah, David, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I I don't really care that much about the sort of physical natural science angle. I really don't care that much about it because, now that I'm a monotheist, I have God and I have miracles and the wedding at Cana, if you remember the story, I don't know if both of you remember the story or
Sure.
not, but there was a wedding that Jesus and his mother and some disciples went to, and Jesus turned water into wine famously, and there were 6 jugs of water, just like the 6 days of creation. And the people that drank the wine said, "Hey, this is amazing wine. Why didn't you? Usually they serve the good wine first. Why did you serve it to us now?" And they didn't know that wine, although it had an apparent history, didn't have a real history. It had only been created by miracle just a few moments before. So that's the only angle, really, as from the theology side. That's the only angle I really bring to bear. So it's sort of a conversation stopper when talking with a
Sure.
non-monotheist. But there's another angle which is maybe interesting for us to discuss, which is the metaphysics or the philosophical side. So I've got the theology, I've got the metaphysics and philosophy, and I just completely ignore natural science. Now, I want to say I did study natural science. I studied physics at university. I've worked in quantum physics. I've published a paper in quantum physics. I've worked in astrophysics at the Canadian Space Agency. So I have a deep respect and love for the natural sciences as far as they go, but they do have narrow limitations, narrow limits, and they're built on the axiomatic assumptions of metaphysics and philosophy. So I focus on theology and philosophy, and when I'm speaking with an atheist, I just focus on metaphysics. So I just want to prepare you for our conversation. It's going to mainly come down to metaphysics.
Sure. And so just to get it out the way then, is there something like you mentioned evolution being, I think I forgot the word you used, sort of dissed it. What so when I'm looking at, like, I'm not an evolutionary biologist. So I have to appeal to authorities and like listen to their arguments and read and like try to understand it. And it seems to make sense from my end, from my presuppositions and where I'm at. But from your end, when I want to know, I'm curious to know, like, what are you like? I'm looking at like rock. The big one for me is layers and rock.
Yeah.
The farther down we go, the less, or the older things get, and then it sort of co-aligns with how dust settles on top of stuff, and over time it just keeps getting, and that's how the Earth sort of formulates, and you have like moving plates and all that stuff. What are your thoughts? What is it for you? What was it? Do you just outright reject it, or
No.
do you have reasons in
Yeah, I have
your, because you
reasons. I have reasons.
okay?
Yeah. For example, I believe in the flood, a worldwide catastrophic flood, and there are lots of creationist scientists, and you can make fun of them all you want, but they're trying to do science, and a lot of them are
Sure.
very well reputed, and they are marginalized in the community. But they're doing science, and they're trying to reproduce some of these observations. Over a shorter time span, much shorter time span, but with these catastrophic flooding conditions. And but not only that, there's sort of counter examples that we could just see, like a fossilized tree trunk that's going through. I can't vouch for this. I've just heard people talk about it, but allegedly there are these sort of fossils that are going through millions and millions of years of layers of history. And how is that possible that this one fossil is traversing all of these millions of years? Doesn't make sense, right? But it would make sense from a flood perspective. I've got a nice book here. Actually, I should have prepared for I never prepare for any of my talks. I just freestyle. But I should have prepared by at least bringing this book over, because it's got pictures of the fossils and the sedimentary layers, and it's I haven't actually read it yet because I'm just really not that interested in the natural science angle. But Gideon Lazar, if you've heard about him, he's a Catholic young Earth creationist, and he recommended it, so I bought it, and I just got it kicking around. But it would have been interesting to sort of go through the pages and see how you respond to their arguments. And there's a lot of bad science, I think, generally. So I'm very skeptical of the natural sciences. There's good science, there's mediocre science, and there's bad science. And there's a lot of bad philosophy that gets sort of sold as science. A lot of books get sold that way. I think about Stephen Hawking. I think about the big names, and they're yes, they are including some hard science, some hard facts, and some observations which cannot be refuted or denied reasonably. But they're also giving a lot of interpretation, a lot of putting packaging around it. So I just want to emphasize with you that yes, I do love the sciences, but there is a tendency for people to put their interpretation, and that sometimes get conflated by the non-specialist reader when they go and they read this book and they think, oh, this is the science, now I understand the science. Well, there's a bit of science in there, and there's a lot of explanation and interpretation, so be wary of that.
Quick, before Neil responds, the route that some people go on is like myself, looking at people like Graham Hancock, for instance, and others who actually point out the reverse, that
Okay.
the Earth is not thousands of years old, but actually it's way older, and civilization is way older than we believe. For
Oh.
example, Graham pointed things out like Göbekli Tepe, for instance, which was intentionally, allegedly buried for thousands and thousands of years, and is estimated to be around like 9,000 years old, or
Oh,
older than
older.
that.
10,000
Older than that, yeah.
10,000 BC. 10,000
Or
BC.
we have examples of people like geologist Robert Schoch, who took a look at the weathering on the Sphinx, and he also gave this blindly, like without telling other geologists what exactly this thing is, and they also agreed with him. And the only conclusion that he could come to is that the reason why the weathering is there is because the Sphinx must have been built something crazy like 14,000 years ago or something like that, like many, many years ago, much, much longer than mainstream archaeologists say the Sphinx was built. And so a lot of mainstream archaeologists don't like people like Graham Hancock
No,
and
no.
others who talk about these ancient civilizations because it's very risky for their careers, much like David, you were talking about mainstream science not
Yeah.
wanting certain
Yeah.
things out there. But again, like their perspective is like, hey, this is actually much older, and your perspective is no, it's actually much newer, but you're rejecting anything having to do with actually doing research, only going by the scriptures. And I understand that's your position, but I want to narrow down, like, why is that your position?
Well, because I see a hierarchy in the sciences. I see God as science itself, knowledge, wisdom itself, big S science, and then theology underneath him, and then philosophy underneath that, and then underneath that is the natural sciences, and then beneath that you've got social sciences and other different stuff down from there. And it's no secret that the natural sciences depend for their existence on philosophy. They cannot get off the ground without making some axiomatic assumptions. So there's self-evident principles, and it's those principles of right reason that allow us to understand that evolution theories, all of them, are untenable. They're all philosophically untenable just because of a handful of principles. The principle of sufficient reason, the principle of proportionate causality, and even the principle of causality itself. These all undermine the claims of all evolution theories. And my least favorite one is theistic evolution, just because it's like they're going to invoke miracles at every step. It's just like, no, 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 please don't do that, because it's kind of like a hybrid between the atheistic materialistic worldview and Christianity. Like, no, don't compromise, don't water it down. Like if you're going to be Christian, be Christian. If you're going to be an atheistic materialist, do that. Pick a lane.
I agree with that one.
Huh?
I agree with that one.
Yeah.
Wait, but in terms of picking a lane, though,
Yeah.
you're talking about evolution. I
Yeah.
want to set evolution aside for a moment and specifically focus on the young Earth part of
Yeah,
Young Earth
Can
creation.
I say something about the young Earth thing? Okay. I think a bigger, I think a better place to start probably would be the flood, because that's when the world starts over. I mean, let me ask David, do you think the world started over, or there was a local flood? What is your position on that?
Global catastrophic flood
Okay.
and 8 survivors. No more,
Okay,
no
cool.
less.
So eight, the population in the world, and let's do a rough. I mean, I did the math myself using the Bible. I came up to 2472 BCE for Noah. You can check me on that. Let's just give it a wide range, 2000 to 3000 BC. 8 people. Well, I know you might reject this right out hand, but the census.gov data has estimates using mathematics, using certain statistics and, obviously archaeology. And they came up with at that time, there's 20 million people in the world. Which isn't a lot.
20 million.
Which, no, I'll give you that. It's not a lot compared to the billions of people that live today, but it's also spread out too. So that's kind of where the problem is. We have different civilizations that are not even aware of each other yet in different parts of the world. There's even archaeology about the history of people found in Canada, by the way. 14,000-year-old villages found in Canada. I mean, I'm pointing out, like, that's beside the point. To go back to the flood thing. So what I'm saying is, if the world started over with 8 people in, let's say, Cappadocia, Turkey, that's where the flood lands, Mount Ararat, it's right over in southern or eastern Turkey, almost in Iraq, basically, like that region, or somewhere over there, and it doesn't matter. South of the Black Sea,
almost in Armenia. That's like the
Armenia is very close. Okay, so it's that region of the world, which is very interesting. Okay, I will give you this. This is the part of the world, that Black Sea region, where the Proto-Indo-Europeans kind of explode with their technology and their chariots and horses.
David, be sure to mute yourself if you're typing.
Sorry. I'm responding to my live chat because I'm simulcasting this. I'll mute myself next time. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. And so it is interesting that there's, and by the way, the cultivation of vines was discovered there, according to the data, saying around 5000 BC, people discovered how to cultivate the vine and make wine over there. And also, it's like Noah was making a vineyard. It's like, what the hell? What did they know? And then you have Göbekli Tepe, not too far from there,
Yeah.
the oldest religious settlement in the world. It's like a little bit west from there. Well, so I'm thinking whoever wrote this has some knowledge of civilization, some history. There's something going. Or maybe it's a coincidence. I don't know. And I'm throwing you that because I'm trying to. What I'm saying is, and my reason for like going in the other direction is if there's 8 people in that part of the world populating, you would expect to see populations spreading out from that one place instead of just being like all over the place, not knowing who each other is, and then meeting somewhere in the middle at some point.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my basic overriding thought is I don't care. I'm going to find out on Judgment Day how it happened. But, you know, to give some respect to your question, to pay some heed to your question,
Sure.
I'll just say that, you know, like my friend Rebecca, I got some help from my live chat here, but my Protestant friend Rebecca is saying that, you know, there are gaps. Sometimes they call someone a father, but it's a grandfather, great grandfather. It just means, you know, ancestor. So, you know, there may be some way that works out. I mean, I'm a little bit, what's the word for it? Complacent in my Christianity, and that bleeds into my Young Earth Creationism. I also want to say, for the record, you know, I'm not firmly committed, like I said earlier, to the age, and but I don't believe that we evolved from lower animals. That's the main sticking point, right? But I mean, you know,
How uncommitted are you to the age? So are you willing to, for example, say that we've been around for, you know, the reverse, like millions of years? Or are you going to stick to like the thousands of
my
years?
preference is, you know, if it's, you know, if it makes me a bit uncomfortable even to say 50,000 years, whatever, it's like too long for me, but, you know, I'd prefer around 10, you know, stick around 10. But this is neither here nor there. This is just sort of like my longing for the garden of paradise, like the Garden of Eden. It's just like I want to be close to it, you know. It's like that's where I came from, and it was perfect and beautiful, and I don't want a bunch of time between me and that scene of the fall, because that distance in time, it creates a sort of a fog and a haze about the whole salvation history story. You know, it's sort of like, well, there's no rush, and, you know, there's so much time in between me and this historic event. And for you non-believers, you know, you don't even believe in the event. But for me, because I do believe in it, I want that proximity to enliven my faith. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, it's not a deal breaker for me if it's a longer period of time, as long as, you know, as long as you don't try to make me think that I evolved from an ape or a fish or anything else like that. That's where I think we should focus our discussion. Because, like, if you want to convince me that, you know, it's tens of thousands of years or whatever, it's like, okay, whatever, I'll just shrug it off, like, maybe. But my preference will still be for you know, 7 to 10,000 years.
Well, I'm not an evolutionary biologist, so I'm not going to go too much into that anyway. So I'm not even qualified to even discuss that stuff, really.
My main bone to pick is that humans have a human nature, apes have an ape nature, fish have a fish nature, and carrots have a carrot nature, and
Sure.
they
I'm fine
don't
with that.
evolve. They don't evolve into each other. Like, we could devolve, like humans can devolve, but they're not going to devolve into an ape.
Well, I noticed you said when you were talking about the timeline of the fall, you said that you want it to
Yeah.
be, and so admittedly, this is like a preference of
Yeah.
what you're. Okay, I'm just trying to feel you out there. But what about, so if we're just going off like what we think makes the most sense based on our presuppositions, why can't the fall of Adam and Eve be a metaphor for? Because I mean, it is interesting how the world sort of really gains a lot of consciousness as far as writing. We're coming out of the Stone Age, we're going into the Copper Age, civilization starting to thrive now. And right around the time where 6,000 years ago is where all this starts to take off. Copper Age starts right around 4,000 BC, right around the time when the Bible says Adam and Eve. This is when we're ending the Stone Age and going into the Copper Age, which is the Chalcolithic, which is the first like real civilized world. So I mean, metaphorically speaking, it matches. I'm wondering, like, what's the difference between thinking this is metaphorically speaking of the world coming out of the Stone Age or something like along those lines, compared to it has to be literal.
Well, it's a dogma. It's a dogma of my Christian faith, right? Like, I mean, I'm bound by my religion that I freely chose. I'm bound to believe every dogma in this book. And one of the dogmas is that we did not evolve. Well, it doesn't say that, unfortunately, but what it says is that we descend from one human pair. And so I'm not allowed to not believe that as a Christian. Okay.
Sure.
Now you can meet Christians who don't believe that, but they've strayed from the Catholic faith, the one holy Catholic and apostolic faith. So I'm trying not to stray. So I believe everything, all the dogmas that I have to believe. There are only like 400 or 500 of them, so it's not that hard. And some of them are counterintuitive, like the Trinity. Like, I mean, I wouldn't believe that unless the church told me to believe it, And same
Right.
thing with many of the dogmas. It's like I wouldn't just naturally intuitively come up with that, but that's, I joined the church and that's what they tell me I have to believe. And I have reasons.
I respect your honesty
Yeah,
on this.
yeah.
'Cause
I have
most
reasons. I have good reason to believe that like I just want to preface the rest of this conversation by just saying that I know that God exists just using pure reason and philosophy. I don't need faith to know that God exists. And if you want to talk about it, we could talk about that, or maybe another time. But then I took a leap of faith into religion, Christianity, and it was an arbitrary leap. Like, I mean, I could have been Jewish, I guess, or Muslim. But looking at history, it just becomes evident that all the stories that the Jews, Muslims, and Christians are telling about Jesus Christ around that time, 2,000 years ago, the only one that makes sense remotely is Christianity. So I'm happy to have moved into Christianity because I had a lot of questions coming in because I was an enemy of Christianity, but every time I had a question, I got the answers that I wanted, and so. My monotheism is based on philosophy and metaphysics. My Christianity is based on an analysis of history, and particularly the history of Jesus Christ and what do the monotheistic religions say. And then my leap into Catholicism in particular is based on authority. Well, all the Christians love their Bible, but where did they get their Bible? They got it on the authority of the church because Christ built the church. So that gives you a sort of the context of how I think in those foundations of my faith. And once I became Christian and Catholic, I just said yes. It's because it's a leap of faith. I have to say, well, God knows better than I do. So if God said he turned water into wine, I accept it. I mean, I don't have a problem with miracles now that I'm a monotheist, right? I did when I was an atheist, but not anymore.
You mentioned that you had a personal experience of a dream, and that when I hear Christians say this, I almost don't know how I can even refute that, because your personal experience, you experienced it. It doesn't matter. Like that's you. Like, I can't even. I mean, I'm wondering, does that have a lot of play into how you felt into your faith?
Yeah. I emphasize, maybe it makes my fellow Catholic apologists cringe, but I always emphasize the personal, subjective, existential trip that I was on that led me into the arms of God, right? I emphasize it's very personal, it's very human, and it's not going to satisfy anyone in a debate context, okay? But that's what happened. That's what happened. Okay, now the silver lining of that embarrassing reality is that since that time, I've gone back and challenged my faith and looked at what are the motives of credibility of Christianity? What are the motives of credibility of the claims of the Catholic Church and the claims of Christ, for that matter? So, yeah, I mean, that's all I've done since my conversion in 2009 is like try to meet people who can challenge me, because I don't want to belong to a false religion, right? That's not good, And it's really embarrassing if Catholicism is false, because I'm literally worshiping bread and wine as if it were God Almighty. So I really, really, really don't want to belong to a false religion if it's Catholicism, because that's embarrassing, right? So we really put our neck on the line as Catholics, because a lot of the stuff that we do, the way we venerate Mary so greatly, and the way we have the Pope is the vicar of Christ. These are shocking to non-Catholic Christians, a lot of them. Maybe not
Right.
the Orthodox so much, but they're really bold and shocking claims. So, but I'm fully committed. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Neal, as far as bringing up probably the middle pillar of what David was talking about, the history of Christianity. Well, first, David, would you say that it's important for you that the Old Testament be linked to the New Testament,
Yes,
as far as
absolutely.
whatever's in the Old Testament gives rise, like the idea of Jesus as the Messiah in the new one?
Yeah,
Like that
absolutely.
is very key for you.
Oh yes, yes.
All right, so Neil, that is something that you've been talking a lot about with various people like Rabbi Tobias Singer and others, for instance. So perhaps we can take some time to explore that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where else to take it with. I mean, you kind of were very honest and forthright about here's my position, here's what I presuppose. I mean, I don't even know where else to take it. I mean, I think
Yeah,
we settled. We find out where we disagree,
yeah.
and that's it. I mean, there's nothing
And
really else to say.
before that, by the way, everybody, if you guys have any questions for David or Neil, sneed those super chats right now. But anyway, yeah, Neil, so go for it.
I'm fine with changing the whole subject. I mean, because we pretty much
Yeah.
dug into it, figured it out.
Yeah.
We disagree. That's it.
Oh no, but that's a very core tenet of Young Earth
Sure.
creationism, like the belief of Christianity, because you could say creationism in the Steinerian sense, in the theosophical sense, for example, the idea that we've all descended in this Neoplatonic way from like the realm of ideas, the realm of thoughts, into our human corporeal forms. But that's like a whole other thing, which has nothing to do. Well, it has a little bit to do with Christianity as far as Plato goes, but that's like a whole other discussion. So Neil, yeah, let's go from here.
Um, so you were asking about how Christianity
How
relates
the Old
to
Testament
yeah.
relates to the New
Well,
Testament.
so I mean, the claim in from Orthodox Jews, and just myself looking at the Old Testament and some of the prophecies about the Messiah. This is where my criticism comes in for Christianity. The Messiah is number one supposed to be the king of Israel. He's supposed to lead Israel to the kingdom of heaven, and that's the end of no more wars, no more like everyone's going to bow. All the kings of the world are going to bow to this Messiah. Those are the three main things that I take away. Now, I probably what you probably are going to say. Well, that's because he's coming back to do that stuff. He's there's a second coming. Is that right? Is that how you get around that one?
Well, I mean, no, the way I get around it is saying that the text needs to be interpreted, and you're not the Pope, you're not a living magisterium, you're not even Catholic, so
True. That's what I was
hey,
going
you
to
could
ask. Yeah.
tell a nice story. You could tell a nice story to interpret the Bible all you want. It's not that interesting to me because I already have a living body, a living church that is identical with Christ. It's the bride of Christ. It's the body of Christ, and it's fully human, fully divine, just like Christ. It's an extension of the incarnation. So it's hard for me to sit here and listen to Neal, Gnostic Informant, tell me what the Bible means, and not
I
get a
agree.
smirk on my
I
face. You know
totally
what I mean? It's like
understand that. Totally understand
I
that.
got the God man
Now,
telling me what it means. So
No,
I, I,
but
I
but
totally
at the
understand.
same hold on, Neil. But at the same time, you've also said that the reason why you are Christian is because in your third pillar there, the idea that you've researched enough to know that there is a connection between the Old Testament and the New Testament.
no,
Like
I
your
didn't say
faith
that. I
does
didn't say
hinge.
that. I didn't say that. What I said is I looked at the history around the time of Christ. This is New Testament stuff. It's New
Yeah.
Testament stuff. Okay.
Mhm.
So, yeah, we can look at the prophecies and how they're fulfilled. We can look at all the many ways they're fulfilled according to the Christian teaching. And we could look at the opponents, what they say, how they're not fulfilled. Okay. We could look at what the Jews say, what the atheists and agnostics say. We could do that, and the Muslims or whatever. But I think maybe the Muslims, they agree with the prophecies because they want him to be another prophet. But in any case, when I look at history to figure out which of the monotheistic religions is true, it just has to do with the person of Christ. It doesn't have to do with Moses or with anything else. It just has to do with the person of Christ. Did he live? Did he die? Did he resurrect? And was there Christianity? Because the Muslims will say, oh no, well, there was no Christianity. It was actually Islam, and they were Unitarian. They didn't believe in the Trinity. Well, I've read works from not only the book of the Bible, the New Testament, the Book of Acts, and the letters of Paul, and so on and so forth. I've also read early church fathers from the 1st century, 2nd century, all the way up until the end of the patristic age. So it's like, it's just not true. What the Muslims are claiming is just simply not true. And what the Jews are claiming doesn't make sense either. If you look at the destruction of the temple, it just doesn't jive. If you want to talk about the Old Testament and Judaism, there you have a problem. I mean, I can have some difficulties, but it doesn't add up. A million difficulties do not add up
Sure.
to one problem. But for the Jews, they have a problem. They don't have the temple. They don't have the sacrifices. So they got a problem.
Well, I
you
think
know,
I think one of the things they have a point on too, and I'm going to hear. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Is that God's anointed one, the Messiah, the Christ, is someone chosen by God. Now, the idea that God chose Himself in another form for a sacrifice, knowing that He's not going to really sacrifice Himself, He's just going to go chill for 3 days and come back out. He's God.
They don't understand. They don't understand the dual nature of Christ. Like I said, the church is fully human and fully divine because Christ is fully human and fully divine. There are two natures in Christ, right? And so when Christ said, not my will be done, but your will be done, Father, that was his human nature talking to his divine nature. Okay, it sounds weird. It sounds weird, but that's what was happening.
Okay, so do you think that when the life of Jesus Christ was predetermined, or do you think Jesus Christ had free will and had no memory of what's going on there?
God has free will. God has free will, and Christ is God. So Christ has free will as God, and then humans were made in the image and likeness of God. So humans have free will. So in Christ's human nature, he also had free will. So he has double free will. He has two wills.
Interesting.
Two free wills. Yeah,
that's a brain buster there. But okay, so I don't know. I'm trying to think where else to take it.
Well, if you run out of topics, we can always talk about the existence of God and the philosophical proofs for the existence of God. That's something that I think would be interesting. But I'll let you guys decide where we go.
Well, that's something that I think a lot of people could agree on, because then you're talking about either like the fedora tippers versus people who do believe that there is some kind of an unmoving mover. And sure, you could say that there is a third option too.
I'm actually willing to just grant that there's a creator for this discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we don't need to go down that road. What's more interesting for me is, though, to go back to the Old Testament, New Testament things there. So, Neal, what exactly would you say is going on as far as the reason why the Jews disagree about Jesus Christ being the Messiah?
Well, the things that I mentioned, Messiah is the anointed. He's the high priest, king of God. He's a man. And he is it's not really like it's a kind of a change in the last second for him to actually be God or even Son of God. So it might have, in my opinion, I'm looking at like what happened around that time. You have the Enochian tradition, so there might be some Enochian Son of Man influencing, and the Metatron stuff. So there is some Jewish I can't just say that there's no Jewish precedent for this to happen. There is some, but it does seem like a later Hellenistic development of the Son of God having a divine nature, being one with God, and that seems to develop. I'm not really my thing is, it doesn't seem clear that this is how it started off, and this was originally the Messiah's plan or purpose.
Do you know God's name? Do you know what God's name, his proper name is? Do you know from the Old Testament?
Yahweh.
Exodus 3:15. Yeah,
Yahweh.
You know what it means in English? The English translation.
Is it I am or something?
Yeah, I am. Yeah. So when
it's interesting.
When the Jews when the Jews wanted the strict and rigoristic Jews, they wanted to stone Jesus for calling himself I am. That's a giveaway. They wanted to charge him with blasphemy for calling himself by the name of God, right? So it's not a later development. It's not a fabrication, right?
Well, no, I'm saying that in that time period of Jesus's life, I'm talking about development as an Hellenistic.
I see. Okay. It was a novelty. It was a novelty when Jesus came on the scene. Yeah. Of course.
Well, David, like what you're talking about is from the New Testament, as far as they wanted to stone Jesus for calling himself I am.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a circular logic, because what you're using to give credence to your faith is what your faith already says. But what Neal, I think, is talking about here is challenging that by going to the earlier faiths and saying, do they conform, do their prophecies conform, let's say, to the idea of Jesus coming and being the new Messiah?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to stack up, evidence for and against Jesus being the Christ, I'm going to win hands down every day of the week, because you can cobble together some arguments. But just look at the number of prophecies and the weight of those prophecies, and look at the subsequent development of Judaism. Just keep your eyes on Judaism. If it's the one true religion, just keep your eyes on it and watch what happens. Anything interesting happen around that time period?
Well,
yeah.
Okay.
It's not coincidence. It's not coincidence.
Let's dig into this. So, I mean, the big one would be Isaiah 53, right? That's a big one, right?
Sure.
The problem with that is, if you just took Isaiah 53 by itself, then yeah, it looks pretty much like the story of Jesus. Now, obviously, there's another option. are the Christians drawing from Isaiah and applying it to Jesus? Okay, that's one option. But there's also another thing that we're forgetting, that Isaiah is a whole book of 66 chapters. So it's not, you can't just take 53 by itself. You have to, what's leading up to 53? And if you read all the chapters leading up, Isaiah 1 through 52, there's something that is very clear coming from Isaiah, that the suffering servant is Israel itself. I can pull up some verses if you want, but it's all throughout the text. All throughout the text, it says, now, Jay Dyer, I talked to Jay Dyer about this, and
he'll talk to you. He won't talk to me.
He blocked me after this. He blocked me after this discussion. I don't know why. He got mad. He got mad at me for like
typical Jay Dyer. Typical Jay Dyer.
Yeah, but we had this one discussion, and he made a point that I was fine with. He said it could mean both. So he granted me that I was correct on the interpretation that the suffering servant is Israel, because if you look at the history of Isaiah, Isaiah's writing right before or during when Israel is being bombarded by the Assyrians and the Babylonians, and they're being taken over to this is right in the middle of that stuff, right before it all gets, the first temple gets destroyed. So he's kind of prophesizing that. He's talking about Israel being just the suffering servant, holding on and not losing their faith after being destroyed for their own, Isaiah gives us reasons. But then you get to 53, and it does turn into he switches off from singular to plural. He keeps going back and forth. So there is that singular where it says the suffering servant, and then all the stuff about that looks like the Christian New Testament. Now, I guess I gave you Jay Dyer's interpretation. Is this yours too?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize or re-emphasize that, I have a dusty old dead book called the Bible. I've got many of them on my shelves, and it's dead and lifeless in my hands. Dead and lifeless and worse than useless. Okay, but I have a church, and in the hands of the church, in the hands of the saints, it comes alive, and then the meaning, it comes out. Okay, I'm not saying that you're not clever and that you can't bring meaning out of a poem or out of a sacred text of any religion. I'm not saying that. You're very bright and you can bring some meaning out, and you could even teach me truth about whatever text it is. Okay, but that's very different. It's a different qualitatively and quantitatively different thing when I hear the saints and the church interpreting the scriptures. So to me, it's all a moot point. Like, you could impress me all day long with your interpretation.
But that has nothing
to
do with the discussion, though. Like, you could say that, but basically what that means is that throughout our debate here, whatever Neal says to you, you could always say, well, it doesn't matter.
You should have this debate. You should have this debate with a Bible alone Protestant Christian, because it's so antithetical to my faith to lean on my own understanding and the interpretation of a dusty, dead, old book. It's antithetical to my Catholic faith. I have a living church.
Hold on, David. You have a show. You have a podcast called Catholic Versus, which means that you have people on, like you said, that they try to challenge your faith.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make any sense if you're
wrong. His answer makes sense. The church the church comes first, then the text. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I can find what Neal says interesting. I can find what Neal says interesting, but it will never ever move the needle of my faith ever, because I'm not a Bible alone. I'm not a Bible.
No, but how do you even have a show? Because then it doesn't matter what anybody tells you or asks you or presents to you on your show on Catholic Versus. You're always going to have that backup to say, like, you may be 100%
it's going to come down
right
to authority. It's going to come down to authority. By what authority do you interpret the scriptures? And when I speak to a Protestant, I say the exact same thing. You're not even Christian, and I'm going to ask you, by what authority do you have the divine interpretation of this text, of the sacred text? But by what authority do you even know that it's the inerrant word of God? By what authority do you know that it's the inerrant word of God?
Right. It's a good question. I'll say critical scholarship, and you would say the church, and that's it. We disagree. That's the end of that discussion, right?
Yeah.
I get why.
That's why I want to talk about metaphysics. That's why I want to talk about metaphysics.
Yeah, no, I get your answer. Lev, you don't have to push him on that. I get what he's saying. It's fine. And you presuppose the church is the true faith, and their interpretation is what matters. And I presuppose that critical scholars and academia is people have different expertise. There's archaeology, there's Bible studies, there's classic studies, there's Greek studies, there's linguists, and I'm looking at all this stuff, and I am appealing to. We're both appealing to authority at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the end of that. We find out where we disagree. So,
Yeah. But if you
yeah.
believed in God, if you believed in the God of monotheism, the God of classical theism, that than which nothing greater can be conceived, the uncaused first cause. If you believed in that God, then you would be worshiping him, because those who seek find, and those who find will praise him. So, but you don't, so we have to talk about just rational, purely rational, philosophical, metaphysical stuff to get you into monotheism. If you're interested, if you're not interested, if you just want to, share your interpretation of the Bible with the Catholic interpretation of the Bible, it's kind of like we're just going to be talking past each other 24/7. And if we happen to agree on some points, it's like
Cool.
interesting, mildly interesting, so when I hate to be a wet blanket, and that's kind of the impression I'm getting, Lev, that you feel like I'm a wet blanket, but
No, I'm just trying to figure out, as far as your own show goes, if you have a debate with somebody and you can always appeal to the authority of the church, then what exactly is there to talk about? That's what I'm trying to
well,
figure
with
out as far.
non-monotheists, I only talk about metaphysics. With monotheists, I talk about Jesus Christ, and with Christians that are not Catholic, I talk about authority, and I talk about the Bible, and where did you get your Bible. That's the three-prong approach to my apologetics, right? So right now I'm talking to a couple of atheists, so I would like to talk about metaphysics. I mean,
I
but
wouldn't call ourselves atheists at all.
Mhm.
Like, I would say that we both believe that there is some kind of a higher power as far as how it emanates into our reality. I'm still working on it. I'm trying to find that out. But that's kind of like the point of these discussions, right? Like, you
yeah,
get people to talk about how they see things based on the evidence that they've accumulated, and then you compare that evidence to your evidence. The one thing that I wish is that there was some kind of a suspension of belief just for a second
yeah,
on your part,
sure.
that the church fathers are right, and you could say, okay, let's have a very sober look at, does the scaffolding of what is my belief system stand up to what Neal has to say?
But
Like,
the
is there
problem,
any possible way that you can take the authority away for a second and just hear like what Neal is saying about these passages
yeah,
and whether it actually does make sense?
yeah, I
Well,
can I can hear it. I do hear it, and I hear it every day on my podcast. People that are not Catholic interpreting texts, okay? And it's like, what have I learned that I didn't already know? I learned that you can pretty much get any text to say anything you want it to say. Like that's true of Catholics too, so it's like that's just because we're very creative, intuitive people, and we can make a text say whatever we want it to say. I'm not saying that Neal is like being dishonest. I'm just saying that when we come to a text, it's just natural to play with it
okay.
and to tease it out. That's it.
All right, let me switch it up then
Yeah,
because the authority of the church. I wonder your thoughts on, can they ever be wrong? They can be wrong, right?
of course, yeah. Remember when they
Okay,
killed
'cause I was
Saint
gonna,
Joan of Arc?
well, yeah, that's a really good
And
point.
then they
I like
canonized her. Ah.
just for dressing up like a man for during a war. What is she
Ah.
supposed to dress up with?
Oh.
She was dressed. They said she was dressed up as a man. That's what they did it for.
Yeah.
And that was like some heresy. But she's fighting a war. What is she supposed to do?
Yeah.
Anyways, that's a whole nother
Put on the
topic. But
pink one. Put on the pink one.
right, right. So, I'm like, when I think of like the early church, Hippolytus, he's a saint. Sextus Julius Africanus is a saint. Irenaeus is a saint. Gregory of Tours, Pope Sylvester II. All right, let's just name a couple. Every one of those people I just named predicted the end of the world before
Well,
1000,
well,
and it all came to pass. Now, you admitted that the church can be wrong, but the question is, I'm not trying to like just point out the church was wrong, so you're wrong. I have a question for this. Leading up to the question is like, how do you? So I'm trying to understand. Do you just follow along as the church goes along and discovers things about the world as it progresses, or how do you know the church isn't wrong?
I know, like I said, I know that the church is wrong about a bunch of stuff, including, I have to be quiet about this one, but including COVID. The church was wrong about COVID, okay? Very wrong about COVID from my, from my perspective. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, but we disagree. I disagree with the church about COVID, and I disagree with the church about evolution. It seems like a lot of people in the church hierarchy believe in evolution. I don't,
Right.
So, I mean, either they're wrong or I'm wrong. But the thing is, I'm not obliged to believe what they believe, and they're not obliged to believe what I believe. It's like it's sort of like we have that freedom for the time being where people can be theistic evolutionists, right? I think it's silly. I don't agree with it. But a lot of people that I love and respect in the hierarchy, they believe in theistic evolution, okay? So whatever. But when it comes down to it, when it comes down to what do I believe and why do I believe it, it has to do with the dogmas. And I always flash this book on the screen. It's just an overview of the dogmas, and there's a hierarchy of dogmas. Some are the highest class of dogmas are de fide, and then it goes down the list to things that are just sort of pious beliefs that are probable, and just go along with it until further notice. And then beneath the dogmas, you've got all kinds of other teachings that are not dogmatic, not defined or whatever. And you've got disciplines, you've got pastoral care, you've got the Pope speaking on a plane or whatever, and you've got your local preacher, your local priest talking from the pulpit, or your local bishop that's saying something. It's like there's all kinds of stuff, but there's a hierarchy there. So I cannot doubt the dogmas, but I know that some of the lower grade dogmas are subject to change. The higher grade ones are not, and it's a spectrum in between. And then beneath the dogmas, it's just like pretty much just out of respect. I try not to, bash the Pope when I disagree with him about climate change or about the COVID or about evolution. I try to be respectful, and I have to respect him and his opinions, even when they differ from my own. And I'd like to think when they were killing Saint Joan of Arc, I would have been on Saint Joan of Arc's side against the majority. And in the time of the Arian heresy, I'd like to think I would be on the side of Saint Athanasius, against the grand majority that fell into the heresy of Arianism. So yeah, it's a delicate situation, but I've got these guiding lights of the dogmas, and if you stick to those, and if you're respectful with the Catholics that disagree with you, then we can all agree to disagree on those things, and it's not a big deal.
So what I'm understanding is you have your own preferences, and those can differ from the church, but you have a hierarchy of things that are unnegotiable,
Yeah.
and you follow them because these are higher dogmas that need to be followed in order to follow the faith.
Yeah, like the Trinity. Like why
Right.
would I believe in the Trinity? Why would I just wake up and believe in the
'Cause
Trinity?
logically it
No
doesn't
one's
make
going to
sense,
do.
right?
Well, I mean, there are motives of credibility, and we can argue for it. We can use our reason to sort of approach its
Sure.
credibility, but I mean, it's not intuitive. And so that's the example that I like to use. And when I joined, the interesting thing is when I joined Catholicism, I said, hey, I talked to my monk friend. I said, hey, I want in because I want to worship your God, but I'm warning you, I don't believe in the Trinity, and I don't believe in the incarnation. I don't believe that Jesus is Lord and all these sorts of things. And he said, that's not a problem because you believe in the one true God, and we're going to educate you. So over the course of 8-9 months, he taught, I listened, I read, I had questions, he had answers, and I went into it under his guidance, where he said, if you accept the teachings, then you're Christian, and if you don't accept them, if you don't accept any of, like, even one of them, then one of the fundamental essential ones, then you will not be a Christian at the end of this process. But we went into it together with an open mind, and I came out the other end Christian. I might have, as some of my friends, I may have gone through the same process and said, well, I don't agree with this one dogma, and they would have said, that's fine, you're not Christian, But as it turned out, I did accept all the dogmas, because those things that were not within my reason, they were beyond my reason, but they were not contrary to reason. Like the mystery of the Trinity, it doesn't contradict reason. It doesn't say that 3 is 1 and that 1 is 3. It's just a mystery that we will never understand. Never, not even in all eternity in heaven, we're not going to understand the Trinity. We won't comprehensively understand it. We will be entering into that life, though. So I hope
Yeah.
that helps clarify.
I mean, I think that I don't even know where to take it. I mean, I appreciate your forthright, complete honesty in all of this, and not trying to. You get a lot of times people who have had these same certain beliefs, not talking about Catholics, just and Christians and Muslims and just everyone in general, and they sort of just throw in like random their own sort of they just sort of argue these things in like a bad faith way. But I don't know where else to take it from here, because you're just being really forthright, honest about it, and we see where we disagree. I mean, I don't even know what else to say.
Yeah, well, we're
The
approaching the 1 hour mark, so I mean, I don't know how long you're going to go with us, Lev, but I'm happy to keep
the
chatting if you have topics.
Yeah,
the one thing that I want to figure out here is when you're talking about things that are not like 2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah.
When you're talking about how you pretty much agreed with, no, not pretty much, definitely agreed with all the dogmas that they provided for you.
Yeah.
That everything was very logical. Neal, I wonder if we could go through some of those dogmas at the possible end over here and try and figure out are all of these dogmas just purely logical, reason-based, or if there's anything contradictory going on within those dogmas? Because that's pretty much like, if we get to the root of it, that's where your faith rests on, right, David? Like, that these dogmas are infallible because they cannot be refuted through logic and reason.
Yeah, the authority that I freely chose to submit, to the authority of Christ and His Church, and Christ and His Church are one. So the church, I do what the church I try to do what the church teaches. You know, when the church told me to go out and get the experimental mRNA jab, I didn't do it.
We
I didn't
can't.
do that.
We still YouTube is a little bit.
I'm so sorry. I forgot. Sorry.
No, it'll
No,
be all right. It was
no,
just cool.
it's
I think
fine.
it's
It's
over
fine.
now. I think it's over now.
Yeah, hopefully so. But
Sorry.
yeah, no problem. But anyway, I do want to go through those dogmas. So
I have a list
dogma
of them
number.
on my website.
Well, if you remember the list of them, let's go through dogma number 1, and so on and so forth. Because I want to see, like Neal, do these dogmas
Yeah,
stand
I'm down.
your
I don't care.
scrutiny?
This is my favorite thing to do.
Cool.
All right, here we
Yes.
go. And by the way, guys, be sure to subscribe if you are here for the very first time. And our amazing Jason Giorgiani episode, Philosophy versus Religion, is going to be coming out this week. Right, Neal? It's
Yeah.
you've
So,
never seen
Monday.
anything like it.
Yeah.
Lev, are you able to click the link in your Twitter chat? I just sent you the link. I'd rather you were in control driving the ship here.
Indeed, I am over here. So here we go.
You
Here
drive
are
the
the
ship.
dogmas. Okay, so God, our Creator and Lord, can be known with certainty by the natural light of reason from created things. I don't know if we see. I don't want to delve too much into the not because it's going to be very difficult for us to disagree about certain things that have to do
What
with,
is
like,
say it one more time? I was reading something.
our God, our Creator and Lord, can be known with certainty by the natural light of reason from created things.
Okay, it's like the ontological argument, right?
Yeah,
It's like every
the
argument for God. It's based on
yeah,
causality is the main linchpin for most of
Yeah, I mean,
the.
yeah, and that's number
I
2 as well.
I
Yeah.
actually don't. A lot of atheists roll their eyes at this argument, and I actually think it's not that bad. I think, like, okay, everything has a cause. The universe has a cause. What was that
I
cause? And
disagree that everything has a cause. By the way, God does not have a
well,
cause.
I'm talking about the ontological argument. I'm
Yeah.
getting off the dogma. I'd
Okay.
like to hear your interpretation
Yeah.
of this dogma, but the ontological argument, everything having a cause and there being a first mover, I'm totally fine with that being the case. I don't think you can refute that, really, and that's why I'm open to deism.
Oh, okay.
That's why I have this. I'm not like a
Okay.
but okay. What's your interpretation of that dogma, by the way?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have, like, remember when I told you it was a very personal, subjective, existential trip to God? It was because, I was thinking about causality. I was thinking about existence, being itself, ontology. And, I ended up concluding, because I wanted to get at the truth, I used sort of a Cartesian method of radical doubt. Like, I doubted everything that could possibly be doubted. And to make a long story short, you end up just believing the one thing that cannot be doubted, which is, I think, therefore I am. So it's my own existence. There, again, we have this idea of Yahweh, I am. That's why I fell into hard solipsism, because I actually rejected all of my faith-based beliefs as an atheist. All of my atheistic faith-based beliefs I rejected, and I was left with one solid truth, which is I am. That's the name of God. And I believed that I was God. So that radical doubt took me to God, but I accidentally misattributed myself. I misidentified myself with that God. I identified with that God. And then, as I told you earlier, it was very uncomfortable. So I was happy to discover that I'm not God, that God is God. But yeah, that's what that first dogma is all about, that we can know through the contingent that there is the necessary. Everything that we see around us is contingent. And that contingent being necessarily implies the existence of one and only one necessary being, whose essence is existence. So yeah, I love that first dogma.
Now, there's a lot of dogmas in here, and I think we're going to be here all night if I go through all of them. But I want to get to some of the juicy ones here. So
Sure.
number 43 and 44, God is infinitely just,
Yeah.
and God is infinitely merciful. Neal, what do you think of that?
I mean, it sounds just like a slogan to me. It doesn't. I don't know how. infinitely just. I mean, the world. I look at the world around me. So I think the problem of evil sort of really opposes this one,
Mm.
because I mean, you can look around in nature and there's a baby lamb just being born, getting swallowed by what do they call it, Komodo dragons, and you can hear him screaming in the belly of the Komodo dragon, suffering and getting suffocated, slow death. That's all he just had a 10-second lifespan. As soon as it was born, the Komodo dragon runs up, grabs it, swallows it, gone. And you just wonder, like, infinitely just. I don't know how. And this brings us to the Epicurean argument of Epicurus. Is actually, let me read it so I don't get it wrong. Let me just read this.
And by the way, patreon.com/break the rules. If you become a patron today, we've just released that Jason Giorgiani in New York City
Okay.
live stream show, which was for patrons only. You got it, Neal?
Yeah.
All right.
Is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he's not omnipotent. Is he able, but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then where does evil even come from? Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? So I think that this is like, these are this dogma and this argument are clashing right now, right? And I'm thinking, like, infinite amount of like, this doesn't something's going on where it seems like, I'd say one last thing. I want to get your thoughts. I'm sort of like rambling now, but I want to say this too. Where is, like, if God is there and he's working in our lives, why does he make it such like a hidden thing? Like, why can't you literally walk? And this is obviously not going to be able to answer this. These are the thoughts in my head. And I'm not asking you to answer this. These are the thoughts in my head. Why can't, on a weekly basis, God just shows up in the sky and gives us a weekly rundown of what he wants done? Like, don't you think there's a better, I can come up in my head of better things of how the world would run, better than, like, relying on ancient books? And you don't have to answer that last part, but you can go back to the problem of evil thing.
We should elect you God. I think you'd do a better job.
No, I don't think so. I don't think I would. I would do.
Yeah. So
would
the
tell
problem of evil is very easy to solve. It's very easy to solve. Okay, it has to do with God being good, being the source of everything that's good, and free will being real and good, and built into the concept of free will is the abuse of free will. If you have free will, by definition, you can mess up, right? You could be selfish. You could do the wrong thing. You could do the right thing. You could do the wrong thing. You could choose the right thing. You could choose the wrong thing. So built into the freedom of the will is that danger of abuse of the will. Okay, so that's the answer to the problem of evil. God is good. Everything he made is good. The free will that he gave his creatures is good. And the mess that we make, it's like when you have a child and you let your child cook with you in the kitchen. The kid's retarded, okay? The kid's going to make a big mess and put the wrong ingredients in the cake, and it's not going to taste too good, might not even rise.
But what if,
and
as
you,
the parent,
as the adult, you have to clean up the mess. But
okay,
you
but
love
what
the
if you
child,
as
you
the
love the
parent,
child, and you're just, it's not
that's
a big
fair,
deal.
but what if you as the parent end up creating a cake intentionally that poisons your own child?
No, you don't do that.
In the case of, let's say, for example, well, hold on. In the case of God, for example, getting the Hebrews to destroy, what's his name, that city, like they circled around Jericho. He ordered the Hebrews to destroy the city of Jericho. Every woman and child, except for that one prostitute there. Neal, am I right about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somewhat.
So that to me at least is an example of a parent making a poison cake and intentionally poisoning their kids with that cake.
No.
Because that is literally God commanding somebody.
Well, no, I think a better example would be hardening Pharaoh's heart, so that so that he would cause this exodus to happen. Like, that, to me, that's one of those things where, and I'm like, we already went through this.
Can I address this? Can I address this briefly? Because one of my favorite saints is Saint Augustine. If you haven't read Saint Augustine, Confessions, City of God, all of his works, he's got a lot of works. Amazing. Okay, he addresses all these questions very succinctly, and when it talks about God being angry or God's arm or all these sorts of anthropomorphisms, or when it talks about evils that God has allegedly done, like hardening Pharaoh's heart, St. Augustine has a very easy solution. Okay, what's the first principle? The first principle is God. Is God selfish, stupid, vengeful, and evil, and whatever? No. God
Well,
is
he
all
calls himself
good.
jealous,
God is all good. So when we read the Bible,
but he calls himself jealous.
when we read the Bible that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, what does St. Augustine say? He says God did not harden Pharaoh's heart. Okay? Because every Christian knows that God doesn't do evil. So what God does is he allows Pharaoh's heart to be hardened. This is exactly what St. Augustine says. And it cannot be any other way. I don't care if you're a monotheist, an
Sure,
atheist, or
I'm
whatever.
fine with that.
We
I'm
have the
fine with that.
principle that God is good. So that solves all the problems. That solves all the problems in the Old Testament of God being a big meanie in the sky, you know?
And that's why I think, this is sort of a Platonic idea of God as the good, the perfect, having no
Absolutely.
flaws. But Plato Plato's good, and Yahweh in Genesis, who says, "I'm a jealous God," conflict. I mean, why is he calling himself a jealous
Well,
God if
he
he's
is
perfect?
jealous. He is jealous. He is jealous because jealousy is not envy. Envy is evil. Jealousy is good. Jealousy is just wanting the good, right? So
I didn't know that.
when you're jealous of your neighbor, you want the good thing they have. That's okay. But when you're envious, you don't want them to have it. You want them to be miserable. Okay, that's envy.
Wait,
These are
what is
very
coveting?
technical.
What does coveting mean?
Well, coveting, I guess, is wanting or
So you can covet without necessarily depriving someone else of something that they have, right? Or no?
yeah. When the Ten Commandments talk about coveting, it's in the negative context, like what doesn't belong. Take what doesn't belong to you. Take your neighbor's ox, your neighbor's wife. I mean, I want I want to have multiple women, but that's not fair to me or my wife or to God. It's like
Hmm.
a lot of men would like to have their neighbor's wife, but it's just like, and a lot of men do it. Like David did it. King David did it. It didn't work out too well for him, but you know, we're covetous people. But we can want things that are good, and we can want them in the right way, and we can also want them in the wrong way. That's the problem with free will. But I just wanted to say one thing that's very important here, which has to do with the dogmas that you read me about: infinite justice, infinite mercy. It's very important to emphasize this. It's that God is identical with all of its attributes, and all of those attributes are identical among themselves. Okay, so it's not like, hey, God's just, and he's also merciful. How could that be? Ooh, no, it's like justice is mercy, is truth, is goodness, is beauty, is unity, is God. Okay, this comes back to the Platonic idea, and the Neoplatonic idea of the one. And it's we can know this by the light of natural reason. We don't need religion to know that the attributes of God, what those attributes are, and that they are united in God, and that they are identical with among themselves and with God, in in
Mhm.
the uh, in the Godhead, not here below.
Well, let's take a step back for a second. Neil, do you agree with what David was talking about regarding the hardening of Pharaoh's heart, being that God allowed
It
the
doesn't
Pharaoh?
matter because I'm solo. I guess technically in sola scriptura because I'm not by the church. Is that sorry? Is that you said Augustine declared that this is the interpretation and that's going to be it? We
That's
just
his
gonna
opinion. That's
there's
his
nothing you
opinion.
can.
He
Oh,
happens
it's
to
not
be
the
right.
church.
He happens to be right. Yeah. Well, that's the that we don't even need the authority of the church. That's just using right
Okay.
reason. And there's no dogma on that. Well, there is a dogma. There is a dogma, like we just read it, that he's perfectly just, he's perfectly merciful, he's perfectly good. That's another dogma. So yeah, the dogmas support what Saint Augustine said. Okay, and when it comes to Bible verses and the strict interpretation of this or that verse, there are very, very, very few verses. I mean, John 6 comes to mind with the real presence in the Eucharist. That comes to mind as one example. There are several examples, but we have a lot of freedom and latitude as Christians when we come to the Bible to play with it, get things from it, interpret it, and it's not like my hands are tied when I go pick up my Bible and it's like I have to look in my book of dogmas. What does this chapter and verse mean? No, it's a freedom that we have, and very few things are nailed down. Very few.
All right. Well, let's go to something tangible then, because we have the Ten Commandments
Yeah.
in Deuteronomy
Is it Exodus
or
or
Exodus. You're right. You're right. I'm sorry, Exodus. And when you look at them in the Old Testament, they don't the Catholic Ten Commandments don't match up to what it says in the text. Did you know this?
yeah? We have two threads. We have two traditions. I think the Orthodox went one way, the Protestants, and I'm not sure
Yeah,
exactly how.
exactly. There's three of
Yeah,
them.
yeah. I think there are three different streams. To me, it doesn't matter. To me, what matters is that everything is accounted for in terms of going astray. Like every time that I'm selfish, and that's basically what sin is. It's choosing selfishly choosing a short-term gain, a short-term good, choosing a lesser good on purpose, not by accident, but on purpose, purposely choosing a lower good over high good. That's what sin is, okay? And St. Augustine said, as I mentioned earlier, that, there's love of self unto contempt of God, or love of God unto contempt of self. So it's like basically selfishness is at the heart of sin, and it's how we choose goods. Everything is good. Free will is good, and everything is ontologically good because God made it. It comes from a good source. But when it comes to choosing among goods, choosing among the options, there are many ways to mess that up, and there are many ways to be very, very selfish in our choices, right? So that's at the heart of that question, and that's what morality is all about. Am I going to love self unto contempt of God? And I'm sad to admit that a lot of the time I do. I do, because lazy and selfish, as are you two, but maybe to a lesser extent.
Now I pulled up the chart of the. I don't want to spend too much time in this, but I just want to point something out that I think is interesting. Lev, can you click on that for me?
Oh, the screen cap?
Yeah.
Sure. 1 second. Here you go.
All right. So the one that really stands out to me, because anyone can go look up the Old Testament and read it, and I mean, you could even get. I have somewhere over here. I don't know where I put it. The Hebrew with the English, and then the New Testament Greek with the English, and you can look at it's the Textus Receptus in Greek, and it's the Masoretic text in Hebrew, and you can read it. Even the Septuagint in the Greek Old Testament has this order on the left, doesn't change. And the one that points, most of it's fine. I don't really care about the order and stuff. Most of it matches up fine, but then you have the idea of keeping the Sabbath, which gets changed. Obviously, Christianity changes that, so it almost looks like. Okay, what's your thoughts on that?
It was transferred to the Lord's Day, but the Sabbath is still Saturday, okay? But we celebrate on the Lord's Day. Okay, so that's
Right.
That's a subtle distinction, but the Sabbath is still the Sabbath, but we celebrate the Sabbath not on the Sabbath, but on the Lord's Day. Okay, so it's a little bit confusing to put it that way, but that's what happened, And the Seventh-day Adventists, they don't seem to understand that, but that's what happened.
Okay. And so, but that kind of proves my point. Is like there's a shift in the doctrine based on New Testament scripture, and that's fine. I get the church is navigating its dogmas based on Jesus and not just the Old Testament. So I'm not really I'm not going to get too picky on that, but it does show you that there are things being changed. And so when God decrees these 10 commandments, he's changing it at some point.
Well, no, because I just said we honor the commandment to honor the Sabbath, and we fulfill that commandment differently because the Old Testament has been fulfilled, right? And it's like Christianity is the fulfillment of Judaism. So there's a new wineskin for the new wine, as Jesus said, and there are many things like that. You could point to divorce, the issue of divorce. What did Moses say about divorce, and then what did Jesus say? Right?
Sure.
So why the contradiction? Well, it's not a contradiction. There's a fulfillment in Christ, and Christ reveals that there was a concession made to the stiff-necked Jews about the issue of divorce. Because guess what? God is infinitely merciful. So he made a concession to the Jews. So there's a fulfillment that if you wanted to be a stiff-necked Jew in the time of Jesus, you'd say, hey, this is a contradiction. And they even bothered him to say, hey, why are you healing people on the Sabbath? And he said, well,
right.
God made the Sabbath for man, not man for the Sabbath. Like Christ is God. Christ is the fulfillment of all that Old Testament stuff. And the Old Testament stuff is a mix of good and bad. And there are concessions there. And, there's a lot of ugly stuff documented in the Old Testament. And, Jesus came to bring in a new chapter, like I said, to bring the new wine. And so we have new wineskins. We shouldn't be surprised. And and I think the destruction of the temple, like I said earlier, is like one of the clearest signs that Judaism is not it's not the way to go, So
I don't know where you want to take it. I think you want to do one more dogma, or there's another thing.
We do have super chats over here, which I think can
let's do that.
facilitate in our discussion. And we actually have a super chat from two different Adams. The first Adam, the Tel Aviv Terror Green, for $2 US. What do your church fathers think Romans 15:12 means?
Was that about the
It's about the
root of
Jews coming
Jesse?
back in.
Yeah, root of Jesse
The
verse.
root of Jesse will come, even he who arises to rule the Gentiles, in him will the Gentiles hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure what
Jesus.
what
Or...
exactly he wants us to do with that. I mean, I could move on to the second super chat from
Um,
yeah.
well, I mean, I think there's a clear answer to that, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know if David would agree, but it just sounds like Paul, who's writing this, is talking about his message to the because Paul's writing to Greeks. He's writing to people in Asia Minor and Greece and Corinth and Ephesus. So he's talking about, and this is letters to the Romans, by the way. So it's about the Gentiles. It's just simple. Like, I don't think there's anything like esoteric about this or anything. I think it's just straightforward.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
agree. I agree.
There's another, by the way, question from Adam Tel Aviv Terra Green. How do you know your church fathers are right about scripture? Haven't they always fought and debated the details?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But like I said earlier, there are very, 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 very few verses that are actually nailed down and where I'm constrained to a certain interpretation, right? So, in my book of dogmas here, in that list that I sent you, there are 426 or so. You know, and there are biblical arguments to support the dogmas. There are also arguments from the church fathers, and there are also arguments from pure reason and archaeology and all kinds of things. But the caveat to that, we've got all the support for the dogma, but that's really a moot point because we don't need any support for any of the dogmas because the arguments supporting the dogmas are fallible. They're not infallible. They're not protected. I don't care what arguments are given to support any of the dogmas, even though the church is nice enough to offer me support from scripture, the fathers, and everything else. I really don't care. What I care about is the dogma because only the dogma is protected, right? So that's a very interesting
Wait,
dilemma.
but isn't that kind of a contradiction? Because you originally said that the only reason why you became Catholic in the first place was because you accepted the dogmas on reason, and now you're saying
No,
that it doesn't matter.
No, I didn't say I didn't say I accepted the dogmas on reason. That doesn't make any sense. You can't accept the dogmas on reason. You have to take the dogmas on faith. I took a leap of faith into the dogmas because I believed in the authority. I believed that Christ is God and that Christ built a church and that church has authority, infallibility, and indefectibility, that it's one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. That's what I
But
believe.
why do you believe it?
Because of
I'm
the...
gonna be like that little kid saying why, 'cause I want to get to the bottom here, the
Yeah,
nitty-gritty.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've already touched on it briefly, but my monotheism is not faith-based, it's based on metaphysics. And my leap of faith into Christianity is based on the person of Christ. What did the monotheistic religions say about Christ? And the stories are ridiculous. They're all ridiculous. And the only one that makes any sense at all is the Christian story. So I'm Christian because of history and because of Jesus Christ. And when it comes to Catholicism, it's like, well, once you're Christian, what's Christianity about? Do they have a book? Yeah. What's it called? It's called the Bible. Which books are in the Bible? And by what authority do we decide that these books are in, these books are out? So that very question will lead you to ask about authority and where is this God-given authority that's in the church? And I'm pretty sure only the Catholic Church makes the bold claim to say that we are that apostolic church, visible church with a visible head. The Orthodox don't dare to say that. They say, well, we have a flat hierarchy and we'll just do councils and these sorts of things. Nothing against the Orthodox. Beautiful church, beautiful religion, and they're our brothers in the faith, as are the Protestants. But when it comes to authority, for me, it's a no-brainer. It's the Catholic Church.
Neil, any thoughts on that?
The last super chat, 'cause I just want to like
Yeah.
add on just a slight conversation about some of the preceding pagan religions, pagan in the sense, or Platonic, Pythagorean theologies that predate or even coexist when Christianity comes around. Do you think and Eusebius was one of the people who argued for this, and I really enjoy reading Eusebius, especially his what is it called? The is it the Evangelion or something? It's what I can't remember the name of the book, but it's
Neon
about
Genesis Evangelion.
I think it's called oh my god, I can't remember the name of it.
Doesn't matter.
Anyways, doesn't matter. Yeah, Eusebius's writings, he argues that some of this stuff is pointing to Jesus, because a lot of the Justin Martyr was writing about, you know, comparing, he probably was duking it out with these pagans who are like, your son of God, he's copying our son of God. He's like Hercules, he's like Mithras, he's like Dionysus. Well, Eusebius comes around and says, yeah, this is all pointing to Jesus. He's going back to the Phoenician text. He's going back to Egyptian stuff. He's going back to Zoroastrian text, and he's pointing out, look, this person said this, and here's how it points to Christ. I wonder, like, do you have any thoughts on that, or what are your thoughts on? And I don't think the church has any thoughts on this either.
Well,
I think they
funnily, if is that a word, funnily? Anyway, it's
Funnily.
funny to think about it, but I think some of the Eastern churches, Eastern Orthodox, there's so many particular churches, it's hard to keep straight, but some of them, I think, have elevated Socrates and Plato to almost like a saint-like like status. And I like that, I like that personally, because I really love Socrates and Plato. Aristotle, I begrudgingly, submit to him because the church likes him so much, but whatever.
Thomism.
Huh? Yeah,
Thomism.
Thomism. Yeah, I'm more of the Scotist Franciscan route, the more Platonic route, Bonaventure and all that. That's more my speed. And there are healthy debates between the Thomists and the Scotists. Okay, like really vigorous debates about some finer points of theology and some pretty important stuff. So yeah, we don't all agree on everything, but I respect both sides. But I'm leaning more towards the Franciscan school. But when it comes to the pagans, yeah, I love the pagans, and I think that a lot of them had grace, and they may have talked about, prophetically about some of the Christian or Jewish stuff, and maybe there was some connection with the cultural crossover with the Jewish people. I don't know. I don't know the whole story. We're going to find out on Judgment Day, but I'm very, very excited to find out just how much is bleeding over. And if we talk about the Great Flood and we talk about the flood stories from China and South America and all around the world, that's sort of a similar idea where there's like, is there a true story somewhere in there? Is it the Catholic version? Or, why are all these stories kind of similar?
Or the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Yeah. But that's the question, though, because when you have Epic of Gilgamesh, when you have all of these different places talking about the flood, it's like the guy who Neal was mentioning. He was flipping it the other way around, saying, well, these things confirm Christianity.
Your mic is really hard to hear you now. All of a sudden happened.
Uh-oh. I know what happened.
I guess I magically fixed it.
Is it good?
Yeah.
All right.
What happened? Just got better.
All right. Anyway, I'm just saying that the guy who Neal was mentioning, he may have flipped it the other way around, where his opinion was that all of these things confirm Jesus Christ, while the other way of looking at it could be that Jesus Christ was created, or rather like the figure of the Christ afterwards. How many years had to go by before we got like any kind of tangible evidence of Jesus being written down, Neal?
Well, like after only a couple of decades, but Paul starts writing within the decade of Jesus. So I don't. That's
okay.
A argument.
All right. That's
by
fine.
the way, ancient sources for people, that's normal. You have to. Atheists need to start admitting this. That for a couple of decades for someone to show up in the sources is not in ancient text. That's normal.
Mm-hmm. But
so
still,
I don't even have that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. But still, what we do have is we have all of these references to these mythological origins that do sound an awful lot like Mithras, like all these other Mesopotamian deities, and so on and so forth, both for the Old Testament and the New Testament. And so I think what's happening here, what Neal was talking about with that guy, is that he took the view, well, all of these are actually based on Jesus, even if Jesus came later. The other interpretation would be, no, all of these are things that were used to create the legend of Jesus Christ and the New Testament, and so on and so forth. So what prevents you? Well, I guess you would say, I don't want to speak for you, but you would probably appeal to the authority that they're right and the people who are saying what I'm saying are wrong. But do you at least see the argument here, what I'm talking about?
Yeah, of course. And I don't know if I've mentioned it yet, but I might be wrong. Like I told you, I might be wrong about Christianity. I mean, he might be a legend. He might be a liar. He might be a lunatic. That's possible, because my faith is that it's faith. right? It's not the certainty that I have, for example, of the uncaused first cause. That cannot be shaken, right? Unless I get clubbed in the head or something. But my faith is in many ways it's sure, because I have a submission to that uncaused first cause, that God. And so, like, I mean, I have a lot of certainty, and it's like a moral certainty that I have, but I could be wrong, you know. So let's be clear about that. I don't think that I'm wrong. Obviously, if I thought that I was wrong, I would not call myself a Christian. And the day or the moment that I discover that I am wrong, or that I become convinced, rightly or wrongly, that I'm wrong, I will leave. I'll just say, hey, I'm no longer Christian because I no longer believe it. So it's not like I have absolute rational certainty
Sure,
that.
but when it comes to that specific argument about all of these mythological things being used to
Yeah, Saint
create the
Augustine goes
legend of
through
any
that. He does a good job of debunking that. Okay, it's just very, very simple. Like, where there's overlap, like there's never. Okay, there are two possibilities. Either it's a perfect overlap, identical stories, in which case it's not two but one, or there's some differences, and then you just look at the
Right.
differences, right? It's like, it's very, very easy. So yeah, are there rumors going around? Like, just read the New Testament. There are rumors going around about what happened to Jesus. They corroborate each other, but there are superficial contradictions. Okay,
Yeah.
but it's the same thing with all the flood stories. It's like, are they 100% identical? No, they're diverse and different. But what's similar, what's different, and why? And we're going to find out. I believe we're going to find out on Judgment Day. What's the truth? What's the truth about all these question marks we have from the fossil record, anthropology, stories floating around, and there's so much we could dig into. Like, did Jesus get married to Mary Magdalene, have kids with her, all that sort of thing? Like, to me, it's absolute nonsense. But a lot
Sure.
of I've met Christians who believe that. Yeah, believe it or
Yeah. Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
It's like, so whatever. The other thing I want to emphasize with both of you and your listeners is the supremacy of conscience. In a certain sense, we have to obey our conscience. We cannot violate our conscience. If you think, like I said, if I believe, then I commit to the belief. If I don't believe, I can't pretend to believe. Okay. Same thing with you guys. You can't just pretend to believe something just to fit in with the
Right.
family or friends. Okay. And it's the same thing with sin. Like, if I believe that something is evil and I do it anyway, even if it's a good thing that I'm doing, but I think it's evil, that's sin. And if I do something evil but I think it's good, it's not sin. So there's a certain subjective primacy of conscience that plays into this objective reality that I'm a creature of God, and some things that I could do are good, some things I could do are bad. But it's what my intention is. That plays a big role too. And it's the same
Yeah.
thing with the leap of faith that I take, or that you take, and you're both on a journey. Lev, I kind of insulted you earlier by just saying you're atheist, but that was just inadvertent. But I appreciate that you took umbrage with that, because it means you're on a journey, you're seeking, and you're not closed off to anything, really.
Sure, but back to what we were discussing here, which is these mythological connections leading to Jesus. From Neil, do you understand David's argument against that?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
your thoughts?
By the way, the text that I was thinking of is called Preparatio Evangelica,
Oh, okay.
preparation for the gospel.
Ah,
By the way, everybody, I don't care what you are, atheist,
should
Christian,
read it.
pagan, you should read this text. It's amazing.
How
It's one of the
long is
greatest.
it? How
By the
long
way,
is it?
very long. And by the way, this text is such a useful. It's such a it's so valuable to scholarship because it has preserved fragments that we've lost. For example, one of the fragments that are in this text is an ancient Bronze Age Phoenician theogony. It's gone.
Oh,
It's gone. It gets cited by people. We know it existed because it's people cite it, but the only place it exists, it doesn't exist by itself. It only exists in Eusebius's works, and he goes through it all. It's by a Bronze Age priest named Shankun the Eighth. But anyways,
cool.
to your point though, I'm fine with that. But it almost is like you have this. It's almost like a matrix thing where you're given this choice to choose the red pill or the blue pill. And sometimes I think, and it seems like this. I don't think you're like this. I think you believe it because you believe it, and you told me you had this experience, and that probably pushed you towards the belief more. But a lot of people I notice are more of an alignment with. I don't even know. It almost seems like I can't go into their heads and see if it's true or not. But I'm just like speculating. Like, does this person even believe, or are they just aligning with the church because they prefer that world because politically aligns with them. You know, understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, and
Yeah.
it's almost like if I align with the church, hopefully they're right and I have eternal life, even if I don't really believe it, even if it's going against all of my presuppositions about science and history. I'm gonna I'm just gonna go with the flow and see what happens, and hopefully, and there's doubts and doubts and doubts and doubts, and I think that's normal. I think there's probably a lot of people like that.
Yeah, I want to say for the record that, I made 2 videos about doubt, faith, and reason and how they work together to, build a worldview. And I make the case, obviously, that the one true worldview is Catholicism. Okay, so spoiler alert there, but I sort of go through some of the excesses. If you have deficiencies in one area, excesses in another, where that would land you. It's a very interesting thought experiment, and it's not. I'm not committed to it 100%. It's just playing with ideas. Okay, so don't take offense if you watch it. You think, I disagree with you on this and that. Yes, of course, just playing with ideas. But doubt, faith, and reason, how do they work together? And Blaise Pascal in his Pensée, I don't know if you read it, but it's a nice work with just little short observations about the faith. He talks about this. I found out afterwards that he talks about this. He talks about how doubt is an important part of our walk with Christ. It's not just about faith and reason. We always hear about faith and reason and faith, but there's also doubt. Like, we have to question, we have to weigh, we have to examine, we have to ask why, that's why I do the podcast. That's why I want to be challenged. And I know, Lev, you're disappointed that I just brush a lot of things off. Like, I'm not worried about that. I got the church. But, there's a method to my madness. Like I said, I've got the monotheism, and I've got the Christianity, and I
Well,
want people to,
I'm trying to see the method. There is actually a comment here
yeah.
from a guy who has what appears to be a black Big Chungus Bugs Bunny avatar named Paradisus ex generate machinarum. And here's what he says. Yes, and the problem. Okay, so there's nothing above here. Okay, here we go. Yes, and the problem is that he refuses to allow himself to be convinced, ignoring all evidence countering Catholicism. He's not rationally convinced. This is just cope from sunk cost, probably. Your thoughts on that?
My thoughts?
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's not my lived experience. My lived experience is that I was atheist, rationalist, Platonist by nature, and prone to idealism, among other things. And through radical doubt, which I challenge you, Mr. Insert name here, I challenge you to do what I did, which is to reject all of your faith-based beliefs, because I've done it. I haven't met that many people that have done it. It's not easy. It's not easy, especially if you have a family and a job and all those sorts of things. It's not easy to actually doubt all of your faith-based beliefs that you take for granted. For example, your sense perceptions, that they are actually real. They correspond with some sort of outer world and other people. It's not easy to do that. I did that. I've stared into the abyss. Okay. And I came existentially through this experience to a confrontation, a very frightening confrontation with eternal life. And yeah, I made some mistakes along the way. I attributed the eternal life to myself. I became God for a brief minute, but I was glad to shrug off that responsibility and to admit that I'm not God, that God is God. And so yeah, there's nothing.
But you're not
there's
doubting
nothing
them
in your
now.
critique. There's no teeth. There are no teeth to your critique of me whatsoever.
But just to be clear, right now you are done doubting. You are not doubting
I'm doubting
anything
every day.
anymore.
I'm doubting all day, every day, all day, every day. I'm looking for reasons to leave Christ. I'm looking for reasons to leave Christ, because I have told you, I don't want to be worshiping bread and wine as if it's God, if it's not. This is very important to me, to doubt my faith. Very important.
So let's go to the $20 super chat, and it's from Adam J. Clayton, Body Genius. Doesn't authority usually trace back to someone saying, quote, because I said so, and you have to listen to me because God told me, via some dream, vision, close encounter? Mormons make the same sorts of claims.
Oh my God.
Existential trips. Your thoughts, David?
Oh my God. Mega cringe. Mega cringe. You need to understand metaphysics. If you're clumping me in with the Mormons, you have no clue what you're talking about. No offense to you, but their metaphysics is whack. It's just it's atheistic, materialistic, pantheistic nonsense. Their so-called God is just a man. Okay, it's a material being subject to change. You can't compare monotheism with Mormonism. No offense to my lovely Mormon friends. Okay, But what was the first part of the question? Tracing it back to some man who says God told me so. Yeah. Well, no one makes the claims of Christ. No one. Find me one other person who makes the claims of Christ. And another aspect of my commitment to Christ that I haven't touched on, which is very, 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 very important, is the example and lives and sufferings and deaths of the saints in every century, every decade of every century. Read the lives of the saints. Just read about St. Paul. Read about his what he did, his conversion. Look at his life before Christ. Look at his life after Christ. Come to your own conclusion. Look at the apostles. Look at their lives before Christ. Look at their lives after Christ. Come to your own conclusion. If you want to pretend that Christ is a liar, a lunatic, or a lord, I can't help you. We're not, go
Well,
for
I
it.
don't know if
That's
that's
not
a
how I
great
read it.
argument because there have been people of other faiths, of other denominations who have become saints, Orthodox saints or Hindu saints,
I
or
revere the Orthodox saints. The Hindus
all
believe,
right.
the Hindus, again, if you're going to clump me in with the Hindus, I mean, that's a low blow because the metaphysics is all wrong. They think there only is God, right? I mean, when it comes down to it, either you believe in God and not God, or you only believe in God, or you only believe in not God. Those are the three worldviews. Or the nihilist, you struggle to meet one who actually doesn't believe in either God or not God. Like that, the true nihilism is hard to come by.
No, but you're answering a different question, and I'm going to get to Neil after this. But just to be clear, I'm not arguing for Hinduism. What I'm basically saying is your argument about, well, just because you converted to Christianity, Catholicism specifically, and you do good works and you're a saint, that means that Christianity works. It's like, sure, you could say that it works because people who have adopted that worldview end up doing good things. People who have adopted that worldview also fight religious wars and slaughter people. So that's why that's not
No,
a
no,
great argument
no,
for
no,
me,
no,
at
no, no,
least.
no, no. You've completely missed the point. You've completely missed the point because
Okay.
when the Buddhist or the Hindu or the New Age person, suffers with dignity and has long suffering and has natural virtue and all these sorts of things, you could smile on it and it looks nice and whatever. And they talk about love all day long, and forgiveness and everything else and compassion. Yeah, it's nice, but what if you dig a little bit deeper? You got to dig a little bit deeper in what they believe. They believe that separation is illusion. They believe that there's only the one mind of God. They only believe in God. They don't believe that you and I and Neil are three truly separate creatures of God. They don't believe that. They believe that you and I are just God expressing ourselves. The analogy I use is the finger puppets. Like I'm the only being, and I got a puppet show going on with my finger puppets. It's very entertaining. Okay, that's all it is. It's just a joke. It's just theater. And again, no offense to the monists out there, but monism is a satanic lie because it says you're not in danger. You're not in danger of going to hell because there is no hell. There cannot be separation from God because separation is merely an illusion. So I'd like to hear Neil's thoughts on that if you have time.
Yeah, let's talk about hell.
It's interesting. Well, it looks like when I look at my interpretation, it looks like hell sort of progresses in its forms over time, and as you get to the Hellenistic age, Plato and the Middle Platonists really, like Plato's Republic, for example. He talks about the cosmology of Homer and Hesiod, where everyone goes to one place, Hades. Well, you can see this similar idea in the Old Testament with Sheol. Like, for example, Samuel is down in Sheol. Okay, so Samuel is not. They don't talk about Samuel going to heaven. He's talking about him going to Sheol and being. His spirit gets brought back when King Saul is trying to find out what's going to happen. Anyways, long story short, you had this idea, this universal Mediterranean cosmology of Sheol being wherever everybody goes. But then all of a sudden, it seems like, and I think Plato influenced this, because in Republic he talks about this idea is just terrible. This is not helping the children become better virtued people. We need a place where the good go and a place where the bad go. And all of a sudden, all these theologies start conforming to this, and you start seeing all these Hellenistic age heaven. The Romans definitely do this. The Romans, Caesar rose up into the heavens with Venus, and then there's a different class of beings. I forgot what they call it. Manes, I think it's called, Manes. They go down into a different realm. So there's a separation between good and bad. And Christianity has this all day. So that's I don't know if that answers your question on what I think. Did you ask me about the monism, that we're all just one and we're all just like different expressions?
The only reality is God, and the
Yeah.
separation is illusion, and God is play acting that he's many. Okay, God's pretending to be many. So we'll leave aside the question of why would God do that. Just leave that awkward question aside. Okay, and the ultimate reality, if you adopt that worldview, is that I'm not in danger because I'm just God playing around. Okay, and that's how I felt as a solipsist, as a hard solipsist. It's just like, hey, what's all this stuff? Hey, what do these physical hands I seem to have? I know they're not real. I know the other is not real. I know this universe is not real. But hey, how did I get here? I'm God. Did I pretend? How did I trick myself into thinking that I'm not God? You know, and that's what like half the planet's doing today. You know, like half the planet is either New Age, Hindu, Buddhist, or some sort of Eastern thought. And a lot of the atheists and agnostics that I talk to, they're very sympathetic to that. You know, it's a nice story. And what I always say to my Hindu, New Age, and Buddhist guests is, hey, if you're right, then I have nothing to worry about. But if I'm right, you're in a lot of danger right now. Okay, because you're on your way to hell unless you repent. You know, and I don't like to use that stick. I'd rather use the carrot. You know, but you know, it's just reality. Like you need to slap across the face, because if I'm right, you're in a lot of danger. And guess what? If you're right, then I'm not in a lot of danger. It's like, this is just theater, right? So,
What is hell supposed to be like, and how do you avoid going into hell?
good question. Yeah, hell is unpleasant, to put it mildly, and you can't get out, and it's just going to be
Ever.
ever, 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 ever.
So even after like all the people are supposed to resurrect on the planet Earth, the people
Well,
who
That's
are
when
in
hell
hell are still
begins.
stuck.
That's when hell
let me say
begins.
something about that, because
Okay.
you raise a really good question for
Yeah,
the monists. Why
yeah,
would God do this?
yeah.
Well, the same question can be posed to why would God create a world where everyone's just going to go to hell unless their minds are shifted in a way where they can believe in something that they didn't see with their own eyes.
Well, we are without excuse, as St. Paul says. We are without excuse if we do not conclude from the contingent that there is one and only one necessary being. I'm paraphrasing St. Paul here, but in Romans 1. But the basic idea is, if we look at causality, if we look at the contingent, if we look at the created world, if we don't conclude that there's a God, the one true God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then we are without excuse on Judgment Day. So it's not like if God, let's say Jesus Christ, the God man, came down from heaven, because he's up there body and soul. If he came down now and appeared, he could appear to all three of us. Like he could show up in my room, your room, and your room all at the same time, because he could do that kind of thing. If he were to do that, you just think, wow, I had this crazy experience, whatever. And it wouldn't change your heart, because that's not the way human hearts work. That's not the way free will works. There's no coercion in religion. There's zero coercion in religion. If there's coercion, it's just politics, right? There's
Okay,
coercion in politics, but there's no
but
coercion in religion. Religion's about love. Do you love your creator? Okay, do you know him? Do you love him? Do you serve him? And if you don't know him, you wake up. Just wake up. Look at where. Ask yourself, who am I? Where did I come from? You know, and where did my parents come from? Where did their parents come from? And just ask yourself, where did all this stuff come from? Because it's very ephemeral. It's very fleeting. And just read the classical philosophers and the pre-Socratics, and they're asking these questions. You know, some of
sure,
them
sure.
hit on the right answers, and some of them just came up with a bunch of nonsense. But these are questions that need to be asked.
Now it just sounds like, and I'm just doing what you did with the monists, where it's like we're created with a lifespan of roughly 100 years, or give or take. He says 120 in the one text after Moses or whatever. After Noah, I mean. Sure, okay, that's nothing. I mean, that's 0.00000 infinite compared to infinity. So it just seems like, what the hell is the point of all this? Why don't we just have creation and we're all in paradise and we all believe? Then you have us all and where you want us to be. You know what I mean?
Well,
It sounds so crazy to me.
yeah. Well, you're missing part of the story of salvation history, right? You're missing part of the story,
Oh,
which is where God created a good world. He put Adam and Eve in there. Everything was
okay,
good, and Adam and Eve messed up. That's the part you're forgetting to mention.
I get
Oops,
that.
oops. Okay,
It
so
explains
it's
it
like,
explains it.
why do we see through a glass darkly? Why can't we just have God come up and welcome us to heaven right now? Why do I need to suffer and die?
Yeah, but there was
Why?
no
Why? Yeah, why? Well, there's a Christian answer to that. I think you know the answer.
well, Adam and Eve believed in
Sin.
God.
Sin.
Adam and Eve
Sin
believed
brought
in
death.
God.
Sin brought death into the world. Sin brought death. It wasn't God. It wasn't God. It was sin. God doesn't want anyone to perish, right? It was sin. Don't blame
So
God.
God here's the thing, God can't do anything about sin then? He has his, like, his own laws that he has to follow?
There's good
That's what it
news.
sounds like.
There's good news. I don't know if you heard about it, but there's
I
good
know, I
news.
know. I
There's
knew
good
you were gonna
news.
say
There's good
this.
news. There's bad news and there's good news. So you know, take the good news. That's my advice. But you know, I'm being a bit silly with you guys. Obviously, I
Sure,
hope you
sure.
don't take it to heart. You know, I'm just playing
No,
playful. I'm being playful.
you're fine, you're
But
fine.
you know what I believe. You know that I believe we fell from grace, and that's our fault, and it's not God's fault. And I hope that is somewhere deep in your hearts. You come to at least contemplate that. You know, what is freedom of the will? It's a good gift. Is it subject to abuse? Yes. What happens if we abuse our free will? It's not good. It's not good. Look at the
Mhm.
wars. Look at the, you know, rape, incest, and the
Well,
pornography and everything we have going on.
in the case of people who are not able to exercise their will properly, like for example, there was that South Park episode, "Do the handicapped go to hell?" I don't know if you're familiar with that
No,
one. But
no.
you understand where I'm going with this, right? The idea, like they had this character Timmy who's in a wheelchair, and he could only like repeat his name, Timmer, 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 Timmer. And there was a question that Carpin brought up, I believe, where Timmy being handicapped, not really understanding what's going on, not really being able to accept Jesus into his heart. Like, what happens to those humans who are born in that situation?
You asking me?
Yes.
Well, they're going to end up in one of two places, right? Heaven or hell. And I trust God because, as you read to me from the dogmas, He's perfectly just, perfectly merciful. I trust Him. I'm going to be happy with His decision. I'm going to be happy with God's decision. And by the way, you know, if you look at number 197 or something, one of the dogmas there, it's about predestination, this Calvinistic idea that some men are predestined to heaven, some are predestined to hell. That's a Catholic teaching, okay? But it's not
Wow.
all, it's not 100% predestined. But some men are predestined to heaven, some are predestined to hell. And but we do have free will, you know. So do I think that I'm predestined to heaven? I hope so. I don't think so, but I hope so. Do I think I'm predestined to hell? I might be, but I certainly hope not, you know. So it's like because of sin, I don't have the clarity. I see through a glass darkly, and I'm very inclined to sin myself. I'm very inclined to selfishness. So I'm in a state of uncertainty and anxiety. And if you meet certain Protestants, like my friend who's in the live chat, Rebecca, she thinks she's once saved, always saved. She believes that she's righteous because of the righteousness of Christ, and she can't end up in hell. Like it's amazing. It's
See,
amazing.
that makes more sense to me. The universalist message. Is that what it's called? Universalism?
No, she's not a universalist. She believes that because she committed to Christ, that she's saved. She's in.
But at any point in life, right? Even
She's
as a 12-year-old doing confirmation. That's what I'm saying.
well.
Is that what
I don't believe in once saved, always saved. Neither did Saint
right.
Paul.
No, I'm asking, is that what that's like that doctrine, right?
The doctrine of once saved,
Like
always saved.
from her standpoint, let's just say for her standpoint,
Yeah,
once in any point in your life, if you at one point in your life said I believe in Jesus, and then that's it. It's like that's like Photoshop.
you're set.
Or
You're set.
yeah, it doesn't matter what you do after that.
Okay.
That see
Okay.
that almost makes more sense to me. Then because like it's like you did it.
Yeah, but then what happens to all the death
You
mutes?
could have died the next day, and then like
Yeah.
nothing. I don't know. I'm just saying. It just
No, but that's the important question here, right? Like, if we're talking about somebody who's so disabled that they're not able to understand who Jesus is, what exactly is going on here,
that's another factor.
it's like, what, do they go to hell then? That's it? Like
Right.
that's their only lot in life?
I mean, I obviously I don't condemn anyone to hell that's still alive, or even those who have passed on. Like Hitler's dead; he's long dead, and most people think he's going to hell. I don't presume that he's going to hell. I hope that he's going to heaven. Is it a long shot? Is it a long shot? Yeah. Well, it seems like a long shot, right?
That's why if Christ really died for everyone, it would make more sense that it doesn't matter who you are, you're saved now. That would be like really like, whoa, you saved us all, even though I didn't believe in you. It almost is like, I don't know. It almost is like, what's the point of even having the sacrifice when you can just say, just believe in God?
Yeah. It's too easy. It's too easy.
Yeah.
But God knows the heart.
Not only is it too easy, but it's also too hard for the people who are not able to think the right way as far as handicapped people go.
Or if people on an island who are like over in near
Yeah.
what is Papua New Guinea area,
Yeah.
they don't have any
But
idea of
but the
Christianity or sin. They don't know what any of that stuff
Yeah, or the
is.
New Sentinel Islands, they keep on killing all the people who try to tell them about Jesus.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the fact that you love your fellow man, the fact that you love yourself, the fact that you're concerned about the justice of God, I mean, it's kind of cute and silly. And it's naive, frankly, because you don't need to worry about justice of God. God somewhere in the Old Testament said, "Are you sure it's your ways that are unfair? Are you sure it's not your ways that are unfair?" Because the Jewish people were saying, "Oh God, you're not fair. It's not fair the way you do things." And God answers anthropomorphically, "Well, are you sure it's me that's unfair? Are you sure it's not you that's unfair?" And that's what I say to you. Are you sure it's God that's unfair? Are you sure it's not that you that's unfair? So, this is why I always go back to first things, the principles of my faith, and that's the goodness of God, the infinite mercy and justice and goodness.
Can I say something about that point? Because I get what you're saying, and I'm fine with that. But then it's God being a good, all good judge.
Yeah.
And you would think, like, okay, let's take this to Earth for a second. A good judge in real life, and real human judge, looks at a case and weighs the evidence and comes up with the right decision based on what's going on. There's not black and white. It's not like you did this. This is what you get.
Exactly. That's the way
But
God is too. That's the way God is too. Yeah. It's very nuanced. Very nuanced. It's way more nuanced with God. Way more nuanced with God than with any human judge. Way more nuanced.
Well, if that's the case, then you would think, from God looking at everyone's lives and saying, from your perspective, you weren't really given a good education. No one told you about Christ. You should get a pass, right?
Yeah.
Or no?
Yeah.
You think God is like that?
Of course, 100%.
Oh,
100%.
okay. That makes more sense.
100%. 100%. I mean, the way we have to think about religion, like I got my handy dandy book of dogmas, right? The way we have to think about religion is that it's like, rules for the Christians, like, oh, what should I do? How should I think? What should I behave? And it's very much by the book kind of. That's one way of being religious, like the Jews of Jesus' day. Very by the book, and like, don't worry, we got it covered. We know all the law, and we have Abraham for our father, and all these sorts of things. This legalistic, rigoristic approach to religion. That's one aspect of religion. There's a good component to it, but there's a lot of man-made garbage in there, and ego, and just selfishness, frankly, and hypocrisy and bigotry. Okay, but the other side of religion is that faith side, the spirit of the law, and love and compassion and all the stuff that everyone on earth agrees about. When I talk to anyone on my podcast from any worldview, they all agree about the basic good stuff, right? So and then when it comes to God, God building a church, setting certain rules and truths that we can't stray from, when I took the leap into Christianity, into Catholicism, I said yes to that. Like, yes, I will try to conform with the rules and whatever. And it's not a burden to me. It's not difficult for me. I do it out of love, and I fall short, and I go to confession, whatever. But when it comes to God, God isn't bound by the rules and the books and the dogmas and all these sorts of things. He can do whatever he wants. So if I go around preaching to you guys, you have to believe in Jesus, you have to, join the Catholic Church, and you have to do this sort of thing. That's understandable from my human perspective, but from God's perspective, he could just do whatever he wants. And if you go to your deathbeds, both of you, without the sacraments, the Catholic sacraments, I'm not worried about you, because God's got you in his hand. He's got a plan for you. And so there's the human perspective, and I have to live like a Catholic and preach like a Catholic. But then I understand that God, he's above all of that, and he could do whatever he wants to do. So I don't want you to paint a picture of the Christian religion like it's so rigid and tight and legalistic. There's an aspect of that which is good, but there's also the reality, the higher reality of God, and in his infinite wisdom and mercy, he can do whatever he wants to do, and what he does is always good. It's much better than what I could preach or tell you about. So just bear that in mind, And
I never actually told anyone this, but when I was a Christian, I used to have, and I never, because when I went back to Christianity after prison, I didn't go back to the Catholic Church. I went to I joined a lot of churches. I tried all these churches. I went to evangelical.
In church?
I went to,
but in prison, did you do it in prison?
No, I started in prison. It was what was it? I don't know what he was. He was just a regular Christian.
Okay.
He just came in from the outside. I think he was evangelical, actually. Cool. But when I left, A friend of mine from high school was a Christian, and I started going to his church. It was
Okay.
just easy to do. I felt weird going back to a church that I haven't been to.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was like, "Hey, I'm that weird kid from back in the day. I'm back." Like, no, I didn't wanna do that, which maybe if I did, I would've stayed. I don't know. Anyways, I had this belief in the back of my mind that I could never, no matter what anyone said, it would never go. It was central to my foundation of Christianity that God is gonna surprise everybody and just save everybody because that's the goodness of God. I had that belief, and I never fought with the pastor over it. I heard his thoughts. It's very legalistic, black and white. Either you believe in Jesus or you don't, and everyone's going to hell if they don't. That was his view. And I just never like challenged that. But in the back of my mind, I always thought, there's no way. Like the character that I just read in Mark, Matthew, and John and Luke, there's no way he would do that. He's gonna What's gonna happen is everybody, I don't care if you're Hitler or whatever, they're all gonna be saved. That was what I used to think.
That's nice.
So I just wanna throw that out there. I think it's relative. I never told anybody that, but I
Thank you.
always held that belief.
Thank you for sharing that. And that's people misunderstand me sometimes because I preach hell. I'm all about hell and God's judgment and judgment day, and you have to be in part of the church, and there's no salvation outside of the church and all that sort of stuff. Like I take a hard line on all that stuff, but at the same time, like I just told you, I understand that it's a lot more nuanced than that, like from God's perspective. Okay. So, and God has a plan for everybody. So, like with as an example about how I've got sort of two sides to this of my life. Like when I talk to my Protestant friends that think that they're once saved, always saved, I say, well, that's good for you. Like good for you, but I'm not. Like you are, but I'm not. So maybe you get a pass, maybe you get a free pass to go to heaven. You can do whatever you want. You go to heaven, but I can't. So there's that subjective element. There's a subjective element to kind of
Sure.
like what you believe. And I spoke about this earlier with the supremacy of the conscience. It's real. Like if you sincerely believe in your heart that you're serving God, I don't see why God would reject you,
But he
because
could.
a lot
But
of
he
a
could
lot of
reject
people
you,
a lot of
right?
people were a lot of people were abused by priests and stuff like
Mm.
that. So I mean, God knows all of that. He takes all of that into consideration. So yeah.
But does that even matter? Because if what you're saying is that you're a human being and you're looking at all of this from a human
Yeah.
perspective, because that's the only one you're capable of having,
Yeah.
it's very well possible that God could decide, you know what? All these people who have been abused, molested, so on and so forth in life, I'm going to send them all to hell just because I feel like it. And I'm going to take all the dictators, all the evil people, all the lizard people, and I'm going to put them up in heaven so they could like rest and relax. And, Jeffrey
Yeah.
Epstein's going to be up there and whatever. Like,
That would be a truly malevolent God that like
It
Epicurus.
sounds like a nasty guy.
Yeah.
no, but just in truth here, like
Yeah.
if we're saying that whatever we may think God can do is only our puny little human perspective, and that really we have no idea what exactly he's going to do, like we can never say, well, God must do it according to this book that we have. Like ultimately, like you said, whatever God wants, he's the boss and he's going to do that.
Yeah, yeah,
Is
yeah.
that not the case?
But listen to me. The ancients and the philosophers, they talked about this. Is God good because he's conforming himself to the good, or is the good good because
Right.
it conforms to
Yeah.
whatever? And it was solved once again by Saint Augustine, who said that it's the very nature of God, right? So it's not like he's looking up in some book, oh, what's the good thing to do? No, he is goodness. Okay,
This
so
is
this
what
is the
Giorgiani
solution.
was talking about. This is a famous part of Phaedra
Yeah,
where
yeah,
Socrates is going
exactly.
into his trial and he sees Euthyphro. And Euthyphro is the high priest, or he's a prophet actually. He's a prophet of the Eleusinian mysteries, very famous prophet. And and they talk, and he's like, and that's exactly what he says to him: "Is God good because he's good, or is he?" I forgot exactly how he
Yeah,
words it, but it's basically what you said.
it's pretty cool. But
This is
yeah,
the question. This is the question.
yeah, well,
Yes.
the answer is that it's the very nature of God. Like I said earlier, and you could read in my list of dogmas later. It's a dogma. It's a de fide dogma that I think it's de fide, that he's identical with all of his attributes, and all the attributes are identical with themselves. So even without faith, just knowing what I know about the attributes of God from natural reason and philosophy, I know that I'm in good hands with God, and that I can't blame him or find fault with him at all, at all, at all. But you and a lot of agnostics and atheists, they have this sort of distrust about God. And so what I always say is, if this God is in any way inferior to you, morally or ethically or whatever, run in the opposite direction. That's not God. right? So until
Yeah.
you find the God that's superior to you, that's infinitely perfect in every pure perfection, until you find that God, the God that I worship, just run away from all the other fake gods, because all the fake gods are demons, right? So if you think that God is unjust just a little bit, or unmerciful just a little bit, run in the opposite direction. Don't worship him. You know?
Well, I wouldn't say run in the opposite direction if there are certain things that do conform with what you see as being the good. But then when you get, for example, that whole thing about destroying an entire city, or the sacrifice of Isaac, the pretend sacrifice, I guess you could say in the end, God decided, psych, that's not happening.
I
But
love
when
that
you
part.
get
I love
all of
that part.
these, yeah, when you get all these qualities that to me seem more like, just personally speaking, more
Oh,
like some,
wait, the big one is when he
yeah.
sends the she bears off for those kids that
Uh,
they called Elijah Baldy.
uh, uh,
What was that about? That's the most randomest
Oh,
thing in
yeah.
the Bible.
yeah.
There's a lot of stuff like that. By the way, in Judges, there's a section where one of the Benjaminites, his wife, he gives his wife over to these people. Or no, the Benjaminites are outside. He
I
gives
don't
his
like that
wife
one.
over
I
to
don't
them,
like
and they
that.
just like, yeah, that's the weirdest shit
That's the
ever.
worst one. That's the worst
I guess
one.
God didn't have anything to do with that part, though, so that doesn't make
No,
sense.
God is good. God is
But
good.
what I'm saying, but I guess the question could be, we can end on this too, because I know this might open up a whole new worms, but we can be quick. It's like when somebody reads that passage about the she bears killing children, you're saying they should run in the opposite direction, right?
Well, I mean, Saint Augustine didn't run in the opposite direction. None of the apostles, or the or even the Jews of Jesus' day, or certainly none of the Catholic saints have run in the opposite direction, because they put first things first. And what is the first thing? The first thing is that principle that God is good, that God is nothing, there's no fault to be found with God. And so they're not troubled the way that you are, and the way that I was as an anti-Christian, anti-Catholic atheist for 25 years. I was
But you
troubled
don't
by
have
that
to
stuff.
be anti-Christian,
I was.
anti-Catholic. You don't
I
have to be.
was. I was.
I know you're saying you were, but my point is that when you're talking about like these dogmas that you could say start, from a very philosophical perspective, and then they continue on down to things that at that point you might say, well, you know what? If I accept the good, why the hell should I care about the Trinity and the Pope and all of this stuff? Why can't I just be a good person and also believe or trust that there are things higher than me? But why would I go with this book where it talks about like she bears attacking these kids and all these things? Like, why not just go the philosophical route? Why
Actually,
take
let
all
me
the
add to that. That's a really good point that Lev's making. Somebody who's just completely takes all the stories and myths out of it. No Bible, no Hindu text, no Greek mythology. They're just purely living virtuous, believing in something higher, and hoping and having faith that if they live virtuous, there's something higher that's going to take
Yeah.
care of them.
Yeah.
It's the same stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. You just nailed it, because what you said was, you said a couple of things that were very interesting. At first you said they're good, good people. That's indicative of natural virtue. And then you said what I was waiting for you to say, hoping you would say. You talked about their love for this supreme being, and their hope that they have in him, and their faith that they
Right.
have in him. It's the theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity, without which we can't go to heaven. So I would say that person, that generic monotheist, has the supernatural gifts of faith, hope, and charity, and I'm not worried about their eternal destiny.
So then you don't. To me,
I
I
was a
don't think it's
generic
the,
monotheist before I became a Catholic. I was a generic monotheist. I was not insecure. I had found God, and that changed my life. And then picking a religion was sort of like an afterthought. It's like, I don't want to be Christian, but whatever.
So then who cares about, accepting Jesus Christ and all the rigmarole? Like, who cares about any of that? Just why have that? Why have all of this, Catholic, Pope and all
Yeah.
this stuff?
Yeah.
It just seems like extra.
There are two answers I want to emphasize, very important to emphasize. First is, again, that existential subjective experience I had, where when I discovered God, I felt this impulse, which is just like a very strong craving, very counterintuitive, because I was never into groups or ritual, but this craving was, I have to worship God publicly. Okay, that's component number one. It was like something that grabbed me when I discovered God and I fell in love with God. There was this push for me to public God worship. I have to worship him publicly. So am I going to be a Jew, a Muslim, or a Christian, or what? And that was, I had to solve that riddle, and I did. Okay, and I'm very happy with the way things played out by God's grace. The second component of that is that, there's because your question was, why do we need all the trappings of religion, and why do we need to have a pope, and all these sort of messy things that are distasteful and a bit repulsive, frankly. Why was I anti-Christian? Why was I anti-Catholic? Because of the black legends, and because of the hypocrisy of the Christians, because of the nasty stuff that we read about in the Bible, all that dark stuff. So the conclusion that I came to, after embracing God and then committing to Christianity, even though I was anti-Christian, the conclusion I came to was that it's just like in the days of Noah. The people that were invited onto the ark, they said, well, this guy's crazy. This ark is black. It's stupid. He's like putting all these animals on there. It's like, doesn't make any sense. He's saying, it's like we're in a desert and he's saying it's going to rain. And, why would I lower myself to stoop to go into this little doorway into this stupid, ridiculous boat? And so the key is humility. The key is humility. And it's pride that kept the people out of Noah's Ark, and it's pride that keeps people out of the Catholic Church. That's my honest, sincere opinion. It really is, because there's nothing more humble. I can promise you, there's nothing more humbling and humiliating than saying, "Hey guys, I'm Catholic now." Like, I mean, all my family and friends were like anti-Catholic, either Protestant or atheist and whatever. There's nothing more humiliating. And I'm not saying that just go out and do the most humiliating thing you can and that's the path to righteousness. No, what I'm saying is that nobody wants to become Catholic. Give me a break. And if you look at the conversion stories, for example, of Protestants, there's so much pressure, so much stigmatization. For example, just to take the example, it's like, it's painful. You have to cut ties with people. There's a lot of hatred, and people don't understand the church. They don't understand. A lot of persecution. So I just want to emphasize that humility, what humility it takes, and not to brag and boast that I'm humble. I'm not. I'm very proud. But by God's grace, I was able to enter into the ark. End of TED Talk.
I love this comment, by the way, from Dave the Impaler. Dave the Impaler. This arc is whack, yo.
Love your name, Dave. Cool name.
That also reminds me of.
I'm working on a video right now about the Proto-Indo-Europeans, and it's really interesting. Right where the ark landed in the text, you have these underground cities built by the Hittites. Even before that, they go back far.
Cool.
And it's in Cappadocia, and I'm almost wondering, like, is this really? But maybe they went underground. Maybe this is like, obviously,
that's another thing that Graham Hancock brought up. I remember at a lecture that he had. And the idea to me here is that, and it goes in a slightly different direction than the humbleness you were talking about, even though I do believe that it is good to have that humbleness. The direction I would go into is say, you know what, there probably were ancient civilizations that were wiped out back then, and there were people who tried surviving, and there were people who were saying, like, okay, guys, it's time to go. It's time to go. I wouldn't say it was just one person. And a legend, a story, a mythology wouldn't talk about, Noah and Fred, who lives, in an island over there, and, Sam, who lives in a neighboring country. They would focus on one person because it fits a good story. It fits something that's understandable to people. Yeah. So in my version, I would say there was this thing that was happening, and who knows, there may have been, again, like your version of God. To me, if that God did exist in some form, as far as this, let's say, being who interacted with other beings, I wouldn't put that person, I wouldn't put that being as God, as in, what created everything. I would put that being, just personally, like Lev here, as an advanced being who knew how he could manipulate society and how he could bring people to believing in a certain thing. And I do believe that, just because of the vastness of at least what I take to be the reality of the solar system and galaxies and so on and so forth, and the absolute minusculeness as well of life, like when it comes to what we can see through a microscope, I believe that whatever we think we know is going to be superseded by other beings. But I wouldn't go as far as to say the being that's going to be doing stuff with us and manipulating us and, interceding in history is necessarily the God Almighty. I would leave room for the idea that there would be other advanced beings out there who are way smarter than us, who could probably travel in ways that we couldn't even begin to fathom.
Aliens?
I mean, you could call it, I'm not saying that
Really?
it's
Maybe you're
aliens,
Mormon.
but
Maybe you sound like a Mormon. That's kind of what they believe.
you never know. No, but here's the thing that I'm getting to here is that there are so many mysteries in life, and I love trying to uncover those mysteries, try and figure out what exactly they are. And I know, like, this is Jason Giorgiani's big point as well about what he thinks that God is. The Elohim being plural, for example. To him, all of this goes back to this congregation of advanced beings who were called gods by the Sumerians and so on and so forth. And they're the ones who are kind of manipulating things behind the scenes. To me, that's much more realistic than to say that the God who created everything is the one that's tricking Noah into killing his own kid while then saying psych later on.
It
And
wasn't
it
Noah, it
wouldn't
was
be, and
Abraham,
it
but
wouldn't
yeah.
Abraham. Sorry about that, Abraham. And it wouldn't be the same God who would command the Hebrews to destroy that city. So that's what I'm getting to here. Like a lot of these attributes, it seems to be a combination of things that were talked about in other religions. For example, Zoroastrianism, as far as the end of days and things like that go, as well as the idea of this dualism of good versus evil, mixed in together with maybe certain beings that were manipulating us for a long time.
Yeah, there's another point to be made here, which is that whole dualism of good and evil. It's not like some grand battle between good and evil where evil has some substance or reality. Evil has no substance. Evil is privation of the good. And so, we have health, and then illness is a privation of that health. And we have heat, and then cold is a privation of that heat, and so on and so forth. This is well established very early in the Catholic philosophy. So it's a Gnostic idea that there's good and evil, because evil in the Christian worldview has no substance. This is part of the reason why the problem of evil is not really a problem at all. It's just like, we can go towards the light or we can turn away from the light. And if you deprive yourself of the light, you're in the darkness. I mean, that's all it is. The darkness has no substance. So I think it's very important to emphasize that.
By the way, wait, who is it? Marcion. Yeah, Marcion cites Epicurus
Cool.
for his reasons on why he thinks Yahweh was. Well, I wouldn't call him he didn't necessarily. People misread Marcion as saying that Yahweh was like the evil devil in opposition. He's more like a created being underneath the Sophia,
Okay.
which is like he just is like a dumbass basically. He's like a daemon.
Yeah.
So like it's not like this what everyone thinks. But anyways, the point I'm making is like you see the Epicurean thought influencing the Gnostics big time. Which is kind of weird because the Epicureans are like the proto-atheists in some sense. Like they're almost like they're very scientific, very rigorous, very atoms versus void rather than Platonic forms, that type of stuff. And it's odd that the Gnostics, who are the knowers, draw from them,
Yeah.
And by the way, there was a comment over here. Let me see if I could find it. Oh, from Gateway, who says, who or what created the aliens? So that is a thing that people bring up. Like when I talk about
Sure.
there being advanced beings, my interpretation of that, just mine, is that the advanced beings would have come around from more of a Rudolf Steiner idea of thought congealing into matter over time. And those beings would be more advanced. And then as we get stuck more in corporeal materiality, we get addicted to being reborn. By the way, I do lean on reincarnation existing, by the way. Because to me, it makes a lot more sense, especially like with the handicapped people, for instance, like you get another chance to kind of build on whatever happened before. But anyway, when you have these
No,
thoughts that
I want to say something to you though, because you're doing something that David, you're just preferring. This is a
sure, yeah, it's just a preference.
and
It's
you're
just a preference.
criticizing him for that.
That's what we should do. That's what we should do. I like
Yeah.
that way. I like that.
But the difference I'd say is that even though it's a preference, I am willing to, and I'm not saying, David, you're not willing, but it does seem like
Yeah.
it's way harder. It's
You're
way
more
harder
open.
to
I'm more
hold you.
closed now. I'm more closed-minded
Yeah.
now than ever. And
But you are humble. And there is, by the way, this to finish this off, because this is a fascinating discussion, but
Sure.
I think now it's time to finish it off with the lyrics from Amish Paradise, because you were talking about
I
humbleness.
love it.
Hitching up the buggy, churning lots of butter. Raised a barn on Monday, soon I'll raise another. Think you're really righteous? Think if you're pure in heart? Well, I know I'm a million times as humble as thou art. I'm the pious guy the little omelets want to be like on my knees day and night, scoring points for the afterlife. So don't be vain and don't be whiny, or else, my brother, I might have to go medieval on your hiney.
It's good.
I saw Weird Al in concert here in Montreal. It was amazing.
Ah,
Weird Al's
nice.
a legend.
And when I let my hair down, that's what I look like. I look like Weird Al.
Nice.
And with that, guys, this is
Respect.
the end. Let's do our plugs. So, David, CVS podcast, Catholic versus podcast. Please tell us a little bit about that and what you got coming out, brother.
I'm just interviewing buttloads of people, a lot of new age people recently. I'm finding them on Podmatch, but I interview all kinds of people, Christian, non-Christian, and it's just amazing. Come over to my YouTube channel. I think you can find it in the link there. My website's really neglected since last September. It's like I'm a one-man show. I work full-time in construction, so I just do this as a hobby, and I'm way behind on that and my Apple podcast and stuff like that. But the YouTube, if you want to be up to date, watch my go to my YouTube channel. That's it.
Oh, and before Neil, another sizzler from Dave the Impaler here. Those handicapped people were Bolsheviks and SS officers in their past life. Don't feel bad for them. Oh God. Neil, what do you got to plug, my man?
Gnostic Informant on YouTube, and I have a second channel for I put up clips and compilations of my content that over the time. So there's two channels, but mainly just Gnostic Informant. Look it up. I do documentaries, interviews, sometimes live. I haven't been live in a while, but I think I'll start doing it again. And yeah, that's it.
Excellent, guys. And you could find me on X at Lev Po. And if you guys enjoyed this, make sure you like right now, smash that like button, smash the subscribe button. Make sure you click the bell. The bell is very important for getting updates on the next BTR episodes. And we're going to be coming out this coming week with probably one of the greatest BTR episodes of all time. It was filmed live in New York City with me, Jason Giorgiani, and Gnostic Informant Neil. The three of us got to meet finally, all three of us, the first time in New York City. We were hanging out there. We were going, eating, drinking. It was awesome. We even got the tour of the Metropolitan Museum, and that was
Yeah, that
that
was
was
cool.
amazing. Yeah. So, guys, be sure to look out for that episode. And if you go to patreon.com/breaktherules right now, you can also watch the Patreon exclusive episode of the live stream with Jason Giorgiani that we shot in the same day. And how it works, and we're going to do a lot more of these afterwards as well, is the patrons get to ask questions to Dr. Giorgiani and Gnostic Informant and get the answers. And it was a really nice jam session there. So if you want to watch that exclusive episode, go to patreon.com/breaktherules right now. It's going to be at the tippy top there. And that's it. Subscribe, like, bell, all that good stuff. We're going to see you guys later. Mwah. Good night, everybody. Bye bye.